I'm going to call this study session of the City Council meeting jointly with Historic Planning Commission to order tonight on February 25th. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First up, we have a joint study session with HPC. Little bit of note, we're gonna just flip the agenda a little bit. After that, we're gonna do the item C, the contractor licensing code amendments, since community development's here. And I think the Safer Streets, that's gonna be a relatively short discussion, hopefully in the Safer Streets after that, so. But I wanna welcome all of our historic preservation commissioners here tonight. Thank you for joining us. I think you guys outnumber council. Councilmember Peters and Grove let me know that they're on their way, so. But no, we're looking forward to having a good discussion, seeing what you are up to and kind of looking at how we can kind of keep moving with the historic preservation here, so. How about we go through and does everybody have their name tag? Let's just go around and introduce each other in case we don't know each other. I'm Kyle Schlachter, Mayor of Littleton.
Reed Benson, City Chair. Steve Barr, Mayor Pro Tem.
Kalina Muir Steele, Vice Chair.
Still getting used to that?
I am, it's so hard.
Hi, Jason Henderson, I'm on the Historic Commission.
Robert Reichart, Councilmember District 2.
Robert Howden, Historic.
Elizabeth Ritter, Historic.
Matt Knight, I'm the Community Development Director. Thank you.
Sarah Dewsbury, Senior Planner.
Amy Fisher, Historical Preservation.
Kim Field, HPC.
Patrick Driscoll, City Council. Joel Zink, City Council.
Jason Smith, Commission.
Paige Alcorn, HPC Chair.
I know, that's not where that came from.
I'm Jim Becklenburg, City Manager.
Councilmember Grove is here now. So do you have anything else you wanna? Great, do you want me, so who's taking us? Sarah, are you taking over?
Yeah, so thank you. Yes. I'll introduce Sarah Dusenberry is going to be presenting on this as the staff liaison to the commission. So turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you for having us tonight. We're gonna go over just kind of an overview of the program, some of our accomplishments, and then what we are hoping to kind of do in the coming year. If how this works. I'm just gonna use the mouse. There we go. So as I mentioned, just going over historic preservation within Littleton, accomplishments, and then the kind of what we have planned for the future. So to kind of quickly start, we are what's considered a certified local government, which means that we are kind of approved by the state. We meet standards for the State Historic Preservation Office as well as the National Park. And what that does is it provides us with opportunity for grant money as well as technical assistance from the state. This is a nationwide program. But it also requires the creation of a Historic Preservation Commission as well as having an ordinance that supports historic preservation. We review local designations predominantly, so the city does have 2 historic districts, Littleton Downtown Historic District, which is predominantly Main Street and Alamo. It's an early 20th century to mid 20th century commercial kind of district is how it's considered. And then Loudoun Heights Historic District, which is a residential district just north of Littleton Boulevard that highlights arts and crafts style homes as well as the unique use of what's called pebble ash, which is the kind of exterior material that is kind of shown in this picture. And then we have 30 local landmarks, which are properties that were individually listed and have significance on their own. And so we have 30 of those within the city, with the most recent one being designated at the beginning of last year, which is 5870 South Curtis Street. And then we also have a few National Register designations. We have 2 historic districts, which is the Arapahoe Hills Historic District, which is a mid-century modern neighborhood, and then the Littleton Main Street Historic District, which is a portion of the larger local district. So it's a portion of Main Street. And then we have 4 individually listed properties, which are Geneva Lodge, Knightwood House, Littleton Town Hall, and then the Littleton Post Office. I wanted to quickly highlight some key differences with national designation and local because they kind of can sometimes be thrown out interchangeably, but they are fairly different. So for national designation, it is kind of a national repository of properties that are found to be significant at that level, and which opens up for federal and state tax credits, Federal, often residents don't get to use those because they're just for income producing properties, but it does have mechanisms for funding rehabilitation. And then the big thing is though, there's no regulatory protection provided. So say a resident of Arapahoe Hills has a really cool mid-century house, they can go through and scrape it right now and rebuild what they want as long as it meets our zoning code. And that's because it's not locally designated, it's only nationally. The exception to this is if federal money is used, and then it kind of triggers what's called a Section 106 process, which is just jargon that y'all don't need to necessarily understand fully. For local designation, that is where we have protection. That's where we, as staff, as members of the HPC, are able to review exterior modifications to the property to make sure that they are in keeping with historic character and preserving them for not only residents today, but in the future. One of the other things that it does, and this is a unique thing to Colorado, is if you're a CLG and you are locally designated, you are allowed to take advantage of state tax credits and some smaller grant opportunities with support from the CLG. So that is something that residents, if they have a locally designated property, do not have to go through an extra step of becoming National Register eligible. So that is something that is exciting for Colorado. So looking at kind of what our HPC and staff does, we review various types of applications, certificates of appropriateness, certificates of demolition, economic hardship, and then the state residential tax credit applications. The biggest kind of piece that we tend to see most often are the certificates of appropriateness, which do review those exterior modifications to local landmarks and properties within historic districts. They also look at and review and recommend designations of further local landmarks and historic districts, and then also administer the Downtown Historic District Grant Program, which I'll talk a little bit later. One of the big things with COAs to kind of emphasize is it's not trying to create a museum. We don't expect anything to not change. It's just making sure that things change and grow sensitively, that we can still celebrate the history of the area and kind of in Littleton's history, while still allowing for that growth and movement towards the future. So quick on the process, pre-application meeting with the applicant, I kind of just go over the various guidelines, the process, understand kind of what approval may be required, and then also kind of helping look collaboratively at these designs. Can provide recommendations to say this might fit better within the guidelines, or this looks great, let's keep moving with it. And then from there, HPC often is the primary reviewer, so I'll develop a report, work looking at the analysis based on decision criteria, which is within our code, but also uses design guidelines specific to the district, and then also Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. A lot of mechanisms for historic preservation at the local level are used kind of nationwide. So some of the tools that we're using are not necessarily unique to Littleton, but kind of broader historic preservation in the country. And so kind of looking at how we review things, we'll take into account, is it a local landmark, meaning that this property was significant on its own to be designated? So it's looking a little bit more at the minutia of the details of the building, while something within a historic district is also kind of understanding its impact on the character of the whole. So it may be a little bit less nitpicky on the individual items, but also wanting to understand how it impacts the buildings next to it. And so kind of accomplishments over the last year, the HPC reviewed 6 certificates of appropriateness, staff handled 1, and these upcoming 2 were actually held and approved in February. So over the last about 14 months or so, we've gone through 9 different applications. We also then approved 1 local landmark, as well as reviewed historic district grants. We rewarded 2 applications, one for the Masonic Temple for a roof replacement, and then the facade improvements at Grand Station. We also were able to complete a 5-year strategic plan and work program, which we'll discuss kind of in bulk at the end there, and then also have a consultant under contract to complete a citywide survey plan. So for the strategic plan, the HPC kind of developed 3 broad goals of preservation, which focuses on stewardship and preservation of both the city's tangible and intangible examples of its cultural, social, economic, and political heritage. Connectedness and outreach encompasses a breadth of activities focused on education, engagement, and collaboration with residents, property owners, and organizations interested in historic preservation. And then internal development is really twofold and looks at the importance of ongoing education and learning related to the field of historic preservation, but also highlighting the importance of collaboration with city council, with other boards and commissions to really ensure that preservation is supported and thriving within Littleton. So for the work program, it's for this year, it encompasses the last couple months of last year and then all of 25. We were able to understand and kind of determine that moving forward with the survey plan was doable, and then also provided some feedback for the Arts and Culture Master Plan. And then the big priorities coming up was the joint session with City Council, as well as the kickoff for the citywide survey plan, any kind of code update and review, and then input on the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. And so we're gonna kind of split these last couple slides between me giving a little bit of background and then also hearing specifically from commissioners. And so for code review, was really wanting to focus on ensuring that our processes are efficient and effective for residents, property owners, applicants in general, but also the HPC and staff. And so that could look like updates to our major minor alterations chart, which is the chart that we use to determine if something goes before the HPC or stays at an administrative level. And really just wanting to understand if there's any kind of code updates or gaps that are needed, and then really making sure that we can respond to feedback from our applicants, from our residents, to make sure that the program works for them as well, most importantly for them. And so I'm gonna hand it over to Chair Alcorn to add a little bit more on the code updates.
Yeah, so just kind of piggybacking off of Sarah, we feel code review is really important just to make sure that we are maintaining an efficient process for property owners in the historic district and for the local landmarks. It is an extra step for these property owners to make alterations to these buildings. We really want to make sure that it's efficient and effective as possible. So that way they feel good about the process and continue to take care of the buildings that really give us our sense of place here in Littleton. I think also code review and kind of HPC being a part of that is also helpful for commissioners, just so that way we really understand the code that we are helping to implement, and really kind of know it like the back of our hands. Yeah.
And so looking at Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan, really wanting to make sure that since historic preservation is one of the 5 kind of components that we're looking at with the sub-area plan, really trying to take a holistic look. So it's looking at historic preservation, land use, transportation, housing, and economic development. Really wanting to make sure that the HPC is included in this process as a stakeholder, as kind of one of the kind of primary drivers for this component. Really wanting to make sure that all the work that was created on the Mid-Mod Mile in 2018 is reviewed. Make sure that there's not any necessary updates to that information, and then really taking that information in conjunction with stakeholder and resident input. Engagement is going to be a big component of this plan, to really make sure that we're evaluating the various approaches to preserving the history and character and understanding what our residents and our stakeholders value most about the historic character in the area, and really looking at the kind of potential tools for preservation. Is it a historic district? Is it an overlay? This is a really unique corridor, so we're wanting to make sure that we're exploring all those options. But also really making sure that all proposed recommendations aim to enhance rather than diminish the historic character and assets within the Littleton Boulevard corridor. So really making sure that as we look at transportation or housing improvements, it takes into account historic preservation, because that's really a key component to creating that sense of place and identity around an area. And so I'll hand it over to Commissioner Ritter. I was like, where is she? To kind of discuss a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this earlier today, and it was interesting to contemplate what really is this commission's role when we're thinking long-term about the city's development. And the components, the multiple components that lock together to give that a certain amount of longevity. And in my mind, it's that these buildings have a liveliness and a lifespan all of their own. We are helping the custodians that have this brief moment in time with buildings that are going to outlast all of us here in understanding the significance and keeping them alive. We're not safeguarding mausoleums here. We're ensuring that these buildings are functional, lively, preserved, and appropriately recorded in a way that keeps them a significant part of our history and heritage in Littleton. With that in mind, because they have these lifespans that are going to exceed what we have here, ensuring that there is some sort of guidance and oversight and hands-on work with the way that they're managed and guided. This is exactly why the commission wants to be as involved as it would like to be in this plan. We are that key stakeholder that can do that function, and it's gonna last a lot longer than our brief tenures here too.
Great, thank you. And then the last one, just to keep things going, is the citywide survey plan. And so a survey plan is kind of a process through which a community kind of comes to understand the character and kind of utility of what we already have in terms of surveys, but then also looking at planning for and prioritizing future survey work that needs to be done. As a CLG, we do have to kind of keep surveys, so this provides that opportunity. So for the citywide survey plan, we are, as I mentioned, under contract and have kind of kicked off at the staff level. The HPC will have their kickoff with the consultant in March. And so we're expected to take about 12 months. And it'll look at our existing records of the surveys that we already have. This is an example of one that was done in 1998. And so we've done surveys in 98, 2001, and then I believe 2018. So kind of the larger, it's been a minute, so it's definitely a helpful tool to have to kind of move forward and plan for the future. It does look at kind of quick survey of areas to kind of understand the historic context and help prioritize those recommendations. Opportunity for the public to kind of provide information as to kind of what areas of the city they deem most important. One big thing though is it's not going to create a whole packet of surveys. It's kind of setting up a game plan for accomplishing those surveys. This is definitely something that takes time and is kind of done and continually updated. One of the things that we do hope to come from it, we are working with GIS to kind of create a survey app using the kind of Esri platform, in which will allow members of the HPC to kind of go out and document some of these buildings, but also opportunities for working with residents, volunteer opportunities on that to kind of further engage with the program and start to understand historic preservation from a technical level, but also kind of just getting to see and explore and celebrate these buildings as well. So really see it as a great way of kind of introducing the broader public to historic preservation if they aren't already aware. And then for future use, can help kind of guide any future local designations that the city or residents may advocate for, adding properties to our Littleton legacy list, which just highlights potentially historically significant properties. And then finally, for a preservation plan, we are kind of focusing on Littleton Boulevard, and so preservation plan is kind of in the future, and so this is actually a step that often comes out of preservation plans to kind of say, okay, do a survey plan and then start to kind of apply these recommendations. This is one step that we can already have in place that can not only help guide and create a more robust preservation plan, but is also a step that keeps momentum going and gets us to that preservation plan while also being able to work on other areas of significance within the community, like Littleton Boulevard. And I will hand it over to Commissioner Field.
Thank you. You know, a survey plan sounds like a big deal, but it is at its essence an inventory of the cultural resources of a city, the built environment of a city. And if you're going to manage something, as you all know, you have to know what you have. And the survey is simply that. It's going out and seeing what you have. As I'm sure you know, as a CLG, we are required to keep our surveys up to date, to keep that inventory up to date. And the city has always done a good job. We've had a great, very robust survey plan over decades. So as Sarah said, you know, these are opportunities to understand what we have, and there are plenty of opportunities for citizen involvement with this. Because these are state and federal programs, you can bet there are forums that are already pre-existing. There's a set lexicon. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't have to be reinvented for Littleton. And some of the forms, I just kind of brought some of my old stuff. As you can see, there's a lot of information on there. But it's actually pretty simple to go out and get that information. You can walk the city, walk a few blocks with an online resource or a simple clipboard, which a lot of these were done with. And just, look at a building, check off boxes, and including, is the building still there? Has it totally lost its? Yeah, I mean, that's always the first question. And actually, it is a lot of fun to do. And you learn a lot about your city. You can see not only the history of the city and the way it developed, but you can also see possibilities for the future city. The city has done a great job with surveys. All of these over the years, which I'm sure you've seen, they're all online. It's a free resource for the citizenry. They can look at it online. And I prefer paper copies. And I am sure that if you asked nicely, you could get your own paper copy if you chose. And this is a reconnaissance survey that was done. A quick reconnaissance, check out the resource. Windshield surveys, they're sometimes called. This was done on Arapahoe Hills. And as you can see, it's not long. There's not a lot of information there. There's a photo. And there's also a historical context that goes along with it that kind of places it in the historical context. And it's the public engagement can be incredible. You can the survey tools that are available now and that Sarah is looking at incorporating into this plan are very user-friendly. And it can involve school children, it can involve volunteer organizations, it can involve neighborhood reservation or residents, and it can involve city council people. And it's actually a lot of fun to go out and walk a few blocks and do a survey and learn a little bit about your town. So thank you.
So that's kind of the bulk of what we got in terms of presentation. I definitely just want to open up to any kind of questions or discussion on what we're doing.
Council, any questions? Councilmember Grove?
I think it's wonderful what you've done with the strategic plan and work plan. I think great job, great job. I had a question about the code review. I know HPB at the time, now it's HPC, did a lot of work on suggestions for code updates. Where is that? I mean, all that work that was done, I think it was submitted to staff, but that was before your time.
Yeah, I have not kind of looking through our files found anything specific to kind of previous ideas. I know that there's some kind of discussion on, but I don't think it was included in the code in terms of kind of mid-mod mile and stuff, so that provides us kind of that option to kind of look at when we do Littleton Boulevard's area plan, but the kind of further notes on just
There were some
where
very
changes,
specific notes
okay.
included demolitions. Is this sounding familiar to those that have been around? Are there copies still available?
I can speak to that just
Yeah, absolutely.
from what I know. That was done, I don't even remember how long ago it was. It was probably 5 years ago. It's been, we were told at that time that the city was going to, here's the plan and here's the ordinance and it needs work and we know that and we're going to do it here. And so we submitted all of the materials that Pam is speaking of and that you remember, all of the things that needed to go in that. And it seems that it's been submitted several times to several people at the city. And, it has not happened. And
Anybody have a copy of that?
I'm sure somebody does.
City might have a copy since it's been
What's that?
submitted.
Do you have a
Yeah,
copy?
it's been submitted several times.
I'm gonna go home and look, I don't think I do, but I'll look tonight.
I don't know who was submitted. I don't know how many. Do you have a copy, Amy?
I need to check at home, I don't think I do.
The city has copies. Somebody at
Somewhere.
the city has
Yes,
copies.
but that might be, if there's some
Yeah.
old files, that would be
Absolutely.
great, because a lot of that work was done, and
Yeah.
I remember one of the topics was demolition, and there was a
Gotcha.
whole lot of other work, and if you don't have to reinvent the wheel, it'd be kind of nice.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. I will kind of go back and, since I know a little bit more what to look for, it might be easier to find too.
And
kind of
I
looking
guess it
back
was
through.
like 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's
I think it
been
was
quite a while.
early in the pandemic, right? We did all
Yes.
that work online.
Was it pre-COVID?
It was pre-COVID.
Sounds like it was
It was
pre-COVID.
done in person.
I started during COVID and I don't remember working on that, so I think it probably was
right before that.
Oh, pre-COVID,
Yeah.
okay, so that's,
Yeah, my
It was
understanding.
when the comprehensive plan was done.
Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is we still track a lot of that stuff in the back end of ENCODE. And so we can go in and verify if those code modifications have been proposed but not adopted. I think we can pull a lot of that, but any information you guys.
I don't even know if they got as far as proposed, but if there's some old files, if Amy is probably about the only one that may have one.
Great, okay.
It's all on you, Amy.
She's been here long enough.
The memory of Littleton.
And, yeah, you don't have it
The
paid.
history of the historical board here, so.
Years from now, we'll be having this
Yeah,
conversation.
historic preservation of historic preservation documents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cobbler's children.
I'm gonna jumping since code review as well. I know kind of moving forward, there probably would be need some more updates with that. And I know it was kind of a lot of the discussion on the February 13th meeting wasn't necessarily the focus of the meeting, but some of the maybe potential conflicts between the ULUC and historic preservation. And I'm thinking specifically with the, the blank walls of like, well, that doesn't really fit in right there. So how can we move forward with that? Has recommended some changes if need be, so.
Absolutely, and that's kind of when I was referencing, making sure that we can respond to applicants' kind of input. That was definitely kind of in the back of my mind with that one, and yeah, so it's just kind of understanding, it's the more that we go through it, more projects come before us, we're able to kind of take what may or did or didn't work, et cetera, and kind of figuring out how to move forward as best as possible.
Member Kevin?
Regarding the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan, it's a complicated beast with many moving parts, consultancies, staff, because, obviously it's so important for us to have kind of a coordinated plan around this. What would you say, open up to all HPC commissioners, what are some of the things that we as council, as we walk into our strategic planning session, do you feel that you have the right information, the right, series of resources, staffing in order to move it forward? Like, do you foresee a major hindrance or a big gap in knowledge? If it's utilities or transportation planning, is there something that you feel that we can start putting into place sooner rather than later to make sure that y'all are gonna be successful in your work? It's truly open. This was not
Yeah.
only directed at staff. If you have ideas of things that you can foresee needing in order to do this job well, and in concert with all the other moving pieces, I'm not saying speak now or forever, but please let us know.
Well, I can say from a staff perspective.
We know we need more of you. I know, just so.
I think what's really cool about the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan is that it's so multidisciplinary, right? It covers a lot of ground. Historic preservation is one clear component of that. All the other ones carry a lot of weight as well, but they all kind of rely on each other, right? And so that we can't do a lot of that work in a silo. So we'll be leaning on our boards and commissions to help support a lot of that work that we're doing, or also as we select, where we're just starting the consultant selection process for that. We'll have interviews actually next week, and so really looking forward to hearing the individual consultants' approach to some of these things and how they'll take into consideration the collaborative nature of that work. How will we work with our community to be able to have a robust public engagement process for that, to make sure that we're capturing all of that historical knowledge in the community, as well as utilizing a lot of the resources we may not know that we have, right, in the community. So I think it's gonna be a very broad project. We're all looking really forward to working on it moving forward, so.
I was
I would say, is the commission involved in those interviews, or is it just staff?
No, staff is doing the consultant selection, but we will have, once they are selected, and we'll be bringing those as a general business item to council.
Well, do they, I mean, is it just general business on one final, basically you're bringing them one solution, or do
Correct, yeah.
they have any option to have any input on any of those? Why would, I mean.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I think, and I'll, maybe I don't know if Jim's got thoughts on it, but I would say traditionally, we would not bring that consultant selection back to the boards and commissions. That would traditionally be at the staff level, and then we would bring that forward to the council for approval of that contract. As we move forward in the initial scoping of the project with those consultants, we will have conversations with those individual commissions as it relates to the scoping of the work, as we're finalizing the overall process of that, so.
And we do have, all of that multidisciplinary staff involved there. It's gonna be a pretty robust
It's a 7-team panel from all over the
process
city.
there, and I think it's, it's appropriate that we look to the staff to understand some of the interests of the boards, because there will be several involved, and then kind of incorporate those interests, and as Matt said, the way that the consultants would interface and move this forward with all the boards will be important, but it's good that we have, I think, the process that we do so that we can move forward. And we will have a study session with the council where there will be opportunities to ask a lot of questions about this, and how that'll all work once we have a preferred consultant identified.
Yeah, and I think, if you remember, we did discuss with each individual commissions and with council study sessions about what the goals and priorities of this project were. So we did take all those into consideration as we built the RFP for this specific project. So, I think we feel like we've already really taken into account a lot of that feedback that we've got, and hope that as we move forward with that selection, utilizing those subject matter experts to make that decision, I think will put us in a really good position.
What's the timeline? I mean, once you get the consultant on board, how long do you think the study will take?
Yeah, I think it'll largely depend on the consultant we choose and the approach, right? And I think, again, we've committed to doing a robust public engagement process as a part of this, right? And so, right now, I think we have a tentative date of hopefully sometime in late April, early May for that contract date to bring it forward to council. And so, I think we had initially talked about a 12 to 16 month project period for that, depending on the selected approach to that project.
The only thing that I might add, from the perspective of the Historic Commission looking to our brethren in the council, is there are a lot of things that we're going to be taking into account for this sub-area, which isn't even a historic district, right? There's so much interlacing with the work of the council, especially in terms of people having access to that area and figuring out how we're going to tell a coherent story of getting citizens from the other districts to that area and back, and trying to create a coherent narrative for the city. I don't know what the answers to those things are, but we won't be in a vacuum. So, I think the question is at least the right question. So thank you.
Well, it's an open question, right? And in terms of resource allocations and needs as you proceed into this large and very complex project, just to stay in touch with us as you proceed forward and let us try to help snowplow away those obstacles further ahead than an emergency. And I think my last point too is that I think some of the advantage in doing the historic work in downtown is that there was kind of a natural series of stakeholders, the businesses and the owners of those properties were kind of a natural advocacy group that you could kind of really latch onto.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily as cohesive on the length of Littleton Boulevard and for how complex it is. And I think we, or at least I, as on council, will be looking to you all as being some of those advocates, as being some of those voices to bring that kind of cohesion, because obviously you have a love and a passion for this work, but there is not necessarily as organized a natural ally out there in the community. And I hope that we can use our HPC to do that to be that nexus of that engagement in the future.
And kind of off that, I think one of the exciting points about this project is that because the corridor is quite large, and that there is such a mix of, there's a large predominance of mid-century buildings, but there's also been a lot of infill. And so your kind of traditional historic districts, say like downtown, may not work as well here. But as the field of preservation kind of progresses and understands the limitations that sometimes historic districts as a tool might place, there have been other tools that are created. We can look at overlays and kind of the excitement of figuring out what is something that we can do as a city that is innovative, that celebrates our past, but still kind of keeps us moving into the future. And I think that that is a really exciting piece of this, and why not just doing a historic preservation plan for Littleton Boulevard or just a transportation plan, et cetera, but kind of including all of them, really does open up that opportunity to kind of marry a lot of those disparate topics together to understand how we can make Littleton Boulevard thrive and kind of be that entry point into downtown and have this connection by using these kind of more innovative tools and having the HPC from the get-go as kind of part of the stakeholder group, looking at those tools, trying to kind of understand them is a really helpful, I think, thing for this process. And I think I'm really excited as a staff member to kind of be working on this. I think it'll be a really cool project, just look at all the components and then working with you guys on it, I think will be really cool and opportunity for innovation.
I'd like to add one thing. I am rolling off of Historic Preservation Commission after 9 years.
What?
And March will be my last meeting, so I'll go from Commissioner Field to Citizen Field. And I am incredibly excited about Littleton Boulevard. This is a great opportunity for the city, and I think everyone realizes that. It is a very complex project, but it is something that requires everyone's support and looking at it, throughout the city, not just Littleton Boulevard. And also, Littleton Boulevard, like so much of preservation in areas that wind up getting saved, they benefit from benign neglect because nobody wants to do anything with it. Well, there's no more benign neglect on Littleton Boulevard. It's a happening place. People are wanting to do something with those properties. And so, really kind of the heat is on for figuring out exactly, how to make this an incredibly vibrant entry to our city. And also, as Sarah said, it's not a museum, and I always say it doesn't exist in a diorama. This isn't colonial Williamsburg. This is a dynamic place, and it grows and changes. And I'm very excited about, the brain power that is going into this and the creativity that's going into it. So thank you.
I'm excited to see you go.
Questions, council? Did anybody on the historic preservation have any comments or questions or anything that they want to add to the conversation or ask council or share?
Just want to add one, back to Littleton Boulevard, just one comment, and thank you to Kim for serving on the original three-person committee who looked at what became the Mid-Mod Mile. Kim has a really nice saying that we all just kind of lived with Littleton Boulevard and drove up and down until this initial study was done. And in Kim's words, the scales fell from our eyes.
We actually looked at it, yes.
Right, but it's a great point that I think one of the, goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it, one of our key obstacles is just educating people to see what we see on Littleton Boulevard, that we see more than just, a dumpy old IHOP or, a has-been strip mall. Like these are real treasures. They tell a story about Littleton. They help tie the whole street together. So as this very complex project is taking shape and moving along, I think from a HPC standpoint, it's kind of a simple message or a simple obstacle that awareness and education is like really, really important to make sure that the historical preservation piece is included and maybe not the driver of the project, but a key pillar of it.
Yeah, and understanding it, walking it, looking at it with it, and this is true for anything in Littleton. Just understanding it enables you to see possibility. It's not just about what was, it's about what can be. And Littleton Boulevard, read all about it.
I just had one other question about the future local designations. I know we have the ones we have here. Has there been any thought to other neighborhoods? I know Arapahoe Hills is the national, but to do anything with a local designation, reach out to the community there? Or some of the other, the only other neighborhood that I can think of would be Aberdeen Village that may, rise to that. I don't know if there's any appetite over there, but just if there are other places in Littleton that besides the downtown and Littleton Heights there, that would make sense.
I think there are definitely other areas. I think the survey plan will really help kind of start to highlight where those other areas may be. I know we have interest in terms of the kind of local single property designation. Historic districts just are always harder to get designated for sure. So the fact that we have more local than districts makes a lot of sense. But I think the survey plan really will be that kind of first tool to say, where are our priority areas? It may highlight that we need to kind of relook at what we know is existing, but because these surveys were done early 2000s, that's about 25 years worth of buildings, because it's 50 years of age. Surveys often look at buildings that are 30 years and older, just to make sure that as they come of age, we already have information. So I think the kind of going through the survey plan and then digging deeper into those specific recommendation areas will guide us and tell us a little bit more about kind of what's important. And I think some of the engagement out of that will also kind of drive us. So I don't think we have any kind of specific in mind right now, but want these tools in place so that we can start to kind of proactively look at these and kind of start working with residents as needed.
Anything else?
Yeah, if I need to say one last thing, I just want to commend Sarah for the work she's done on this commission. We're very lucky to have her as our historic preservation planner for the city, so thank you, Sarah, for all your work.
Yes, indeed.
Really happy to be here. This has been super fun. No, yes, absolutely. I think we went from 2023 to not having a meeting every month to 2024 having most meetings. And I think it's just also indicative of the excitement within downtown and our various other historic properties, and that it is a tool that is helping, absolutely. Kind of the reason people want to come to downtown, a lot of times it's how it looks, how it feels, and then the added bonus of having a really good mix of businesses. And so I think it's been really exciting for me to be here so far.
So I'd like to thank Kim for her 9
Yes,
years.
absolutely.
You beat me to it, Pam, so thank you, Kim. All right, well, we're gonna move on then. Yeah, you guys, we're just
Thank you.
stick around and listen, we're gonna talk about contract licenses and safer streets forever.
Thank you, you
Yeah, for
too.
all your service.
I drive a car with I wear my seatbelt, I promise.
We'll have a discourse later.
You're like, get out.
Now you can leave.
Now you can leave.
Yeah, let's take a short break.
Friends and influencing people.
What is this?
I held back so hard. Wow. And I was like, I was like.
moving on to, as I said before, we're gonna, skip the safer street, not skip, but just move it later. Bring up the contractor and licensing
Sad trombone.
code amendments.
Switching things around, I didn't.
Yeah, we're just gonna talk about the contractor licensing here, so.
Slip it in here, yes.
City manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Our chief building official, Tim Steinweiner, has been with us for almost a year. And I think this might be your third series of code updates.
Second, working on third.
Second, working on third, thank you. And I just wanna say that's really important work that's needed to be done. I know Tim is very involved and has been, reaching out to lots of folks around the region to, make sure that our code works for us, for the issues that we have, but are also consistent and predictable for contractors. And I think this, the changes that we're talking about tonight are in that same vein and are intended to make things more predictable, more consistent, and ultimately higher quality and faster for our residents. So Tim, with that intro, turn over to you.
All right. We'll try to keep this short. There's not a lot to it, but let's jump right in. Let's see. All right, so we're gonna talk about the purpose of the amendments, the specifics of the proposed amendments, and then we'll take some questions. A lot of this is to align us with the Design the Future process. Are you guys familiar with the Design the Future process? So in that process, we talked about a one-stop shop for permitting and licensing, but we were licensing contractors in 3 different locations in the city, right? So we wanted to pull all that in. So that got us started on this. So we wanted to create an easier to navigate code with the help from the city attorney's office. We wanted to clarify license classification types because we're adding some. We wanted to standardize testing, and this is a big one, eliminating the need to rely on other jurisdictions' testing because we have no control over what's in that test, what code cycle they're on. So we're bringing that in-house. We added right-of-way and arborist licensing to community development, formerly housed in Public Works, so that we have one database and one location for that. We updated the insurance amounts to match industry standard, and we adjusted the fees for our contractor licensing based on actual costs, and we updated our license suspension criteria to close a loophole that we had identified. So the proposed amendments, again, we added a table of contents. Makes it easy to navigate for people who are trying to find their license requirements. We added definitions of our license types and of terminology used within the title. We added our arborist licensing, now administered by community development. We added a Class M license type, which is municipal. This is going to be our right-of-way contractors. They have a different criteria that we put them to. They are a bonded contractor versus a licensed contractor. So in 2024, we did a fee schedule. We figured out what it actually cost us to process all these things, and in many cases, our licensing fees actually went down. Not by much, but $20 here and there is still $20. So we set up a fee schedule that actually matches what we're spending. We're not allowed to charge for electricians. Plumbers are also licensed by the state. I don't know why we get to charge for them, but not the electricians. The state will not let us. Plumbers got the short end of the stick there. And then we added definitions in the code for all of these different types. And A, B, and C, those are general contractors. They're gonna be different levels of residential and commercial construction. Class D is specialty. There's about 30 types. We only license 2, roofing and HVAC. Then Class M is the right-of-way, arborist, and then electricians and plumbers are actually licensed by the state. We don't examine them, we just check their license with the state.
Just a bit of clarification here too related to the fee schedule. We anticipated this change coming shortly after the fee schedule was adopted, so these were already included in that fee schedule the council adopted in January.
With the classes that don't yet exist?
Yeah, they didn't exist at the time, knowing that they would by the time that we actually had licenses needing to be renewed.
And the classes did exist in a slightly different form, so.
But like an arborist didn't exist, but now there's a fee for an arborist, but we don't have an arborist.
It just didn't exist in community development. so it did.
All right, so we eliminated reciprocal licensing with other jurisdictions. Previously, if you were licensed in some other Denver suburb, we'd give you a license. But what test did you take? What code cycle did you take it on? We have no way to control any of that. When there is literally a national standard test that can be administered, it can be administered 24 hours a day. It's all online, and it's through the International Code Council. And so if you have maintained your license for years under a reciprocal license with another city, we'll still honor it until it expires. You don't renew it. And then we'll put you through the new process. But all new contractors will take a standardized national test. It's always available. It's from the people who actually write the code. So, and this is what most jurisdictions do. I just didn't feel comfortable with it.
If most jurisdictions do this, they should have it, they don't have to take it again, they just have to show you the certificate.
Just show us the certificate. In fact, we can just look it up online at the ICC website. We can see who's current.
They don't have to take it 38 times for every municipality.
And it's good for 3 years. And then you just renew with continuing education credits. You don't have to take it again. So the state licenses electrical, plumbing, and manufactured homes. There's a manufactured home license. It's not a contractor. They can drag it onto the property and tie it down, but you still need a contractor to hook it up. So that's just something we monitor when we're having new manufactured homes being dragged in. Contractor's licenses now expire at the end of the calendar year versus 12 months from when they applied, because we have no way to track that. And that's why everyone's license kept expiring and we kept chasing people. Our software is designed to renew once a year, just like when we did our code amendments for the I-codes. We did 6-month expiration because that's how the software was designed. So if we tried to chase every expiration date all year long for every contractor, because they're not checking. And so it seems like every time someone applies, we're reminding them to renew their license again. So this way we can send out reminders all at one time. And it'll be a lot simpler on the permit tax.
Is this gonna bog you down at the year end? Cause I know for the state with licensing, that's one of the reasons they don't do this, because it's overwhelming all at one point in time to have to go and send these all out and review them and reach out to people. And then when people don't respond, fall into that.
It's funny you should mention that, because as of today, and probably going live by Friday, is a license application and renewal system that is 100% online. No more paper applications, no more permit techs involved, everything's done online, and reminders will be emailed out. We've been wanting to do this for years, and we finally got the resources put aside, and it's ready to go.
Yeah, just say that. I thought it makes a lot of sense rather than tracking every day there's someone else's gonna expire and you gotta send them out to them, but apparently Department of Revenue says we can't handle that.
So I think it'll go pretty smoothly. So a current ICC exam lasts for 3 years. Renewed using continuing education credits that are available, through American Wood Council, through ICC, through the Colorado chapters, through any industry organization. They'll have classes or trainings, and it doesn't take much. If you're just renewing that one, take one class every 3 years. You've got enough credits to renew. But it just makes sure that you're constantly updating your education. And we can check on those too, because you register those CEUs with the same people who administered the exam. So if you have renewed your license and it's still current, we know that you did your continuing education. Again, someone else is doing all that for us. We updated insurance threshold amounts for contractors, 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. That again aligns with industry standards. We were a little low. And we added clarification of license suspension criteria to add non-payment of fees. We did have contractor who slipped through the cracks and bounced a bunch of checks, and took a while to get back to us. And so we realized that we had a little bit of an exposure there, so we closed that for a suspension criteria based on non-payment. So we're seeking approval for these Title III amendments, and I'll open it up for questions.
Questions, council?
Like, what is your elevator speech on why this is why this is an improvement?
Well, taking my favorite one is taking the exams in-house, right? So not relying on other jurisdictions to dictate our criteria for what makes a good contractor and what qualifies you to be a contractor in our town. And so that's aligning us straight with the same organization that licenses and certifies our building inspectors, building officials, fire marshals. It's one organization. They write all of our codes, and our contractors are gonna have to take an exam based on those same codes. So that's one of my favorite things. And then bringing all of the licensing into one location in community development. So we have one set of permit text, we have one database, we have one expiration date, we have one form online that you're filling out. Everything is in one place. So we're not getting the constant calls back and forth where I'm right of way, I'm an arborist, I'm a general contractor. So, and it really does make it a lot simpler for us and the customer, well, for the consumer, actually the customer and the consumer, it should make it easier for them, knowing that the contractor they chose met the national standard to have a license through us.
Is the net, I mean, you may not know the answer to this question, so I apologize for not saying ahead of time, but compared to our peer cities, where are we in, or how many of them are using the same standards we are versus having their own set of standards and rules?
They all base their exams on the ICC test. The problem is most jurisdictions love amendments. They start amending the code to meet their own city, whereas I prefer to not amend the code, right? So the standard ICC test aligns with us with our very few amendments. So most of the time, they're running their own exams in their own cities to make sure these contractors know all of their local amendments, local ordinances that affect how you build there, whereas we don't have a lot of that.
So in the long run, is it gonna be easier or harder for a contractor to get licensed in Littleton versus Inglewood or?
It will be easier because the book that they keep in their truck, that they keep in the field that they build to is our exact code. All right, they don't have to learn local amendments.
Thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks for your work on this. This has been a big pet peeve of mine for 8 years now. One of the reasons I ran for council. So has this been beta tested yet with the contractors out there to just, you said ease of use. Is that something you're gonna try to do, or you're just gonna assume it works as clean and as easy as you think it does?
We stress tested in-house when we built the new contractor licensing system. It has now been built in our live system, and by Friday we'll make that swap. And then we really start the stress testing.
Okay.
Because it really had to get live. It had to get out there for someone who didn't help develop it to use it.
Right.
And then we'll get the feedback.
Yeah, hopefully we will.
Feel some real stress.
Good, no, thank you for all that work. I know it's been long time coming, and we're contractors, continue to say we're tough to work in because of our technology. So hopefully we're finally getting up to speed.
So to piggyback off that, not to the actual how it works and everything, to make sure they can do that, but as we we're in the legislative session for the General Assembly, when we go through and do create laws, we have stakeholding. Have you guys I hope you have, but did you talk to any contractors and say, hey, does this make sense what we're doing here? What's their feedback been?
Yes, we did talk to contractors, just like when we did some counter hour changes. We put out the word, we got the feedback. I sent out 4,000 emails to every licensed contractor.
To the licensed contractors in Littleton right now and say, we're gonna do this, give us your feedback.
In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have used my own email address. But I did get a lot of feedback.
Use Reed's next time.
It's been overwhelmingly positive.
Okay.
Just one last question on the insurance requirements. Feel like that's not gonna end up precluding people due to, the cost to carry that insurance. I mean, it's not that high, but I'm less familiar with that kind of mom and pop shop level of coverage that oftentimes folks are carrying, so.
It seems high, it's really not that high. The deductibles are extremely low. When I was a contractor, 20 years ago, I had those same limits, and
That's
a couple
kind of
of
what I
$100 a month.
That's kind of what I felt, but I wasn't sure. I just needed a gut check on making sure we're not pricing out the smaller 1-2
If
person
they're
shops.
licensed anywhere else in the state, they're already paying that.
Okay, appreciate it, thanks.
Yeah, I want to emphasize too, all this work that Tim has done has aligned with the Design the Future work that we've been doing over the last 2 years to simplify our processes, to streamline our processes, to kind of eliminate a lot of the headaches that we've experienced in collaborating with the development community, contractors, applicants, and things like that. And so, if you'll remember, he started just under a year ago. Shortly after that, we had made some modifications to our permit system to streamline that. That has been an overwhelming success in reducing the number of applications that come in incomplete or with questions or issues. Modifying the amendments after that we had in the code has also increased compliance significantly. Many less, or much less issues with contractors and applicants and things coming in. Inspections have been much more streamlined. And so it has all been overwhelmingly positive that we've had as we continue to make these changes as aligned with kind of that Design the Future paradigm.
I just had 2 more questions. First, do we have a online list of all licensed contractors where a homeowner can go and look to make sure that the person is licensed if they're getting to?
It's not a list, it's a search, but they can.
But they can, so there's a place that Robert is gonna go do something to his house, he can look up the
I
general
need a new
contractor.
deck.
Huh?
I need a new deck.
Yeah, he wants a new
That
deck.
may or may not require a permit, so give us a call.
I think it's big enough. Thank you for.
So search, what is it just on the community?
It's an E-Track.
E-Track it, you can search for a license.
Search for a contractor in the same tab where you apply for a contractor license.
A little
All contractor.
caveat.
I know, as you say, I don't think a homeowner is gonna go to a search for, or to apply for a contractor license is where to figure out how to.
Yeah, I think the challenge is the contractors that are licensed or up to date changes pretty frequently. And so it's hard to maintain a list that's available online.
Well, if it's a search, but I just wanna make it easy for the community members to
Yeah.
find out.
What I would offer is if sometimes the contractors register under a different name than they might give you a business card for potentially. Or they might be an LLC and they might omit that, so the search function in E-Track, it can be a little finicky, so I recommend if there's any, give us a call at the building permit desk, we're happy to look somebody up for you as well anytime. We're available Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. till 6 p.m., right? 5 p.m., 5 p.m.
And the last question is just more about enforcement. I suppose the Class M licenses, because they're doing right-of-way work, that you're out there seeing them and making sure, you know they're there likely. With arborists being the new one, I know there's people, driving around, walking neighborhoods, cutting trees, so is it any arborist, anyone that's doing any tree work, or is it only, because it said mostly they do it in right-of-way, do they have to be doing it in the right-of-way, or if it's someone just trimming a tree in someone's backyard, do they have to be licensed as well?
That's just a standard contract. Arborist license is designed for right-of-way work, city trees.
Okay, so it's not for someone that's just trimming a homeowner's trees that they don't, okay, that's all.
Yeah, I think the big thing is it's occupying the right of way to where you have an outrigger, right, that's sitting on a sidewalk or in the street, you've got traffic control, you know how to operate that machinery, you're not damaging sidewalk, right, by utilizing that, or you're ensuring pedestrian safety as it goes through those areas. So that's the caveat, making sure that they're actually licensed to do that work.
Anything else? I don't have any questions, I think it makes sense. So just the general, there's not more work needing to be done, it's kind of more streamlined in one place rather than having it licensed in various departments.
I have one last question. You were talking about, the test doesn't include the specifics of Littleton code. How do we make sure they know the code? They just kind of look it up, or how does that work?
Know our code or know the
Yeah.
code in general? Because with our code amendments last year, we took out all the really specific codes that they would have to look in our code for, so they can pass an ICC test just using the standard code books, because all of our local amendments are just with snow load, things that are gonna be local to any jurisdiction. We took out all the overreaching
So
building
they just
codes.
look that up.
They can look it up in any ICC book that they can get.
Any other questions? No. Great, so this will come back, is it next week?
I think we're looking at beginning of April for finalizing everything for adoption. Yep.
For second reading or for?
I think first reading we have
First
April
reading,
1st, second is the 15th, I believe.
Yep, great. All right, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Well,
That is a presentation, that's for
so
sure.
let's take another recess while we switch over things here while the other crew comes on
I
up.
have mint if you want.
We're back here. Last item on the agenda tonight is our Safer Streets Littleton update. Know we're all looking forward to hearing what's kind of going on with this. It's been an important topic last year here, so Jim, to introduce everything.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, one of my favorite things about these updates is that you really get to see the cross-departmental effort that we have for this initiative. This is one of the most important things that we're doing. We truly do have this team working together on the progress and work that you'll see tonight. So in a moment, maybe as the team starts, if you could just introduce yourselves again so that we know faces with names, that'd be great. But I'll just give the intro that, tonight we really want to, we do have a lot of content, and I know that, we all would like to see it all and move, but I also want to thank the team for this work because it is really trying to give a recap of our 2024 efforts, which was a huge year for this initiative, moving this work forward, of course. And then, you know, we left our budget process. When we left the council on this, we talked about how we would bring back the projects. There were some placeholders in the budget. We'd bring back the projects, the pilot projects, the other work, the corridor study plans, all of that now. So that's really a big focus of tonight too, is to give you an update on the work that we're planning for 2025. I want to note, and I know that the team will, that we're also trying to bring a little bit of a more of an ongoing framework for this. You'll see that term strategic plan, because we are trying to communicate to you and to the public that to have a sustained initiative here, it's going to take that kind of longer term thinking, transitioning from what projects are we doing this year, what are the immediate things, to how are we setting this up for success long term. So with that, feel free if I've just hit your first 3 slides, feel free to skip, but if the team could take over, that'd be great.
So we want to start? Introductions. So Gene Enley, I'm the division chief for patrol. Doug Stevens couldn't be here because he's on vacation.
Funny how that works out.
I don't know who approved it, but somebody approved it.
Well planned.
Brent Soderlin, Director of Public Works and Utilities.
Kenna Davis, Transportation Planner.
Shane Roberts, Transportation Planner.
Aaron Human, City Traffic Engineer.
And Emily Kleinfelter, Transportation Planner.
So I'm gonna go ahead and kick things off. So we're pleased to be giving you this presentation tonight. The staff is really passionate about this project, and Jim touched on, you know, we wanna have a sustainable plan into the future. We were talking tonight, you know, it's really been about a year since we really started this, and since it's a relatively new program, we do think focusing on it strategically is the right way to go. So in your council packet, there was a memo that covered all the 2024 work, but today's presentation is gonna focus on the 2025 work plan and programs moving into the future. So what are we gonna cover tonight? We got a lot to cover tonight. So we're gonna cover the ongoing projects, and those are projects that are outside of the Safer Streets Littleton programs, but kind of have the same intent. They're safe, you know, safety, accessibility, and comfortable mobility improvements. We're gonna cover the strategic plan. Staff really felt this was important to be able to, you know, plan strategically to meet city council initiatives and goals. And also we'll be covering the Safer Streets initiatives, broken down by 4 programmatic goals developed for the strategic plan. And then we'll talk about next steps, and then we'll talk about the transportation plan update. And I believe Aaron's next, or you next?
Thanks, Brent. So as Brent mentioned, we wanted to highlight our transportation mobility and safety efforts that are continuing in 2025, separate from, but with a similar intent to Safer Streets Littleton. So we have more than 20 ongoing projects in various stages of planning, design, and construction that will impact safety and mobility in 2025. Most of these projects are possible due to grants obtained to fund the work. As a couple examples for you, so our planning project, we're gonna be doing a Highline Canal Underpass feasibility study at Mineral Avenue, and this is thanks to an Arapahoe County Open Space grant. And it actually came out of the Mineral Mobility project that we've talked about before, where we got public feedback that people were interested in looking more in depth in an underpass at Mineral Avenue rather than maintaining the existing at-grade crossing there. An example of a design project is through the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant. We have funded a Broadway intersection project, which is building off of the Broadway corridor study that we did last year, to provide bike and ped safety along Broadway, and we're specifically looking at Littleton Boulevard and Mineral Avenue, and those 2 intersections as a part of that project. And then an example of a construction project, I think you guys are all familiar with the Santa Fe and Mineral Intersection Improvement Project, also known as the Quad Road Project, which is focused on safety and capacity in that area.
So there's just some examples, but want to give you an idea of a lot we have going on. But then we also want to get into, we want to highlight that these 2025 projects are not simply planning, designing, and construction the same infrastructure as typical in Littleton, but instead are utilizing state of the practice components for moving pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles. So you're already aware of the Quad Road project with the left turn restrictions and a roundabout that's gonna be included as part of that project. But that is not the only innovative solution we are looking to bring to Littleton this year. We also have, we'll be incorporating concepts such as complete streets on Euclid Avenue, designs that slow vehicular turning traffic with protected intersections at multiple locations, and various context-sensitive approaches to bike lanes, considering shared use paths, protected bike lanes, and cycle tracks where possible and appropriate. And then we are also looking at projects to train future cyclists and pedestrians through the installation of practice parks, which we will discuss a little more later. So with that, now I want to turn it over to Kenna, who will talk to you about our Safer Streets Littleton strategic plan.
Yeah, so diving into our strategic planning, I first want to start with why are we doing a strategic plan and why is this necessary? As we know, this program was created very swiftly last year, and we've really recognized the need for the program and the benefits it's bringing to our community. But we also recognize the need to really think strategically of how we're moving this program forward into the future and managing it internally. So with that, we've been defining our priorities over the next 5 years. This includes creating a whole list of actions of things we're already doing and wanting to do. We have a list of over 74 actions currently with 7 different strategic areas. We did hire a consultant to help us with this work and think through these initiatives, look at what gaps we potentially have, look at our workload planning, and then also help us define funding and staffing needs for the future as well. So a little bit about our strategic plan philosophy. A safer Littleton starts with us. This includes city staff and leadership, all of you sitting at this table. So what does that include? It means a culture of safety within our plans and policies and actions and daily operations. We also need sustainable funding for this program to ensure that it's successful. Secondly, we want to engage continuously and educate consistently. So this means regular messaging on safety needs to be ongoing and not just a one-time effort. We also want regular outreach through schools, businesses, neighborhood organizations, and we want to leverage social media, different events that we have citywide, both Safer Streets specifically and citywide events like Little Jams or Meet Greet and Eats. And then we also want to maintain our partnerships to make sure that safety is front of mind for everyone. And then lastly, we want to build streets that put safety first. So we want to design for all users and all abilities, especially for bicyclists and pedestrians. We want to prioritize quick, low-cost safety fixes, as well as test solutions with our pilot projects before we spend the investment on permanent installations that are much more expensive. And then lastly, we also want to strategize the long-term funding of this program and figure out how we can leverage city funds with grant funding to make our dollar go forward. So with that, with our strategic plan, we created a vision and mission for the program. We felt it was really important to define a vision and mission so that through the different initiatives we take on with this program, we can link back to this vision and mission and make sure that we are accomplishing what this program is set out to accomplish. We met with 7 different stakeholder groups that vetted this vision, mission, and goals. Those were both internal and some external stakeholders like South Suburban Parks and Rec. And this also incorporates feedback that we have heard over this last year of this program, including feedback from you all at City Council, our Transportation Mobility Board, and public input through our neighborhood traffic calming program and our pilot project survey. I will say that, this plan really is for internal use and program management of Safer Streets. Our transportation master plan that will be updated next year will do a more robust community outreach effort that will really define the community's vision, mission, and goals as part of the TMP.
Was the TMB part of the stakeholder group that you?
We are bringing this strategic plan to TMB in 2 days to vet it through them. Because yes, they are a very important stakeholder through all of this. So this is a high-level overview of our 4 strategic plan goals. These were developed based off of the 3 different pillars that we had last year, which was infrastructure, education, and enforcement. We did want to redefine those 3 pillars to better reflect what this program intent is and what we're trying to accomplish. So this is really the foundation of how we're going to accomplish our vision and mission. These individual goals, should be considered throughout our different initiatives as well. And the rest of the presentation is actually structured around these goals, and so we'll go more in depth on each one. So I will pass it off to Aaron to talk about our first goal, which is People First Streets.
Thank you, Kat. So I'll speak about the first goal, but first I want to share the description to ensure that everyone understands the intent of this goal and how this strategy impacts future infrastructure improvements as part of the Safer Streets Littleton program in the city. So as you can see, it talks about prioritized street improvements and multimodal projects that put people first by enhancing safety, connectivity, and comfort for all users. So how will this goal be utilized? So first, by continuing to take the holistic approach that we've talked to you guys about many times before, that it's, planning first, then designing, followed by construction, and finally considering the long-term maintenance implications of any project. Also by continuing to look for project opportunities, so meaning utilizing our partnerships and identifying grants to help fund projects. And then through specific safety projects where we implement safety solutions at strategic locations within the Safer Streets Littleton program. And finally, also through our pilot and quick build projects in order to collect information that tests ideas before investing in final infrastructure, as kind of discussed before. So the public will be able to assist in achieving this People First Streets goal through the refresh of the neighborhood traffic calming program, for which we are doing a couple different things before we roll it back out again. First, working to identify a reasonable timeline to both evaluate and respond, and then to address concerns that are brought up through that program. We also want to produce an interactive public-facing data dashboard to identify related locations and concerns so that when people do, identify concerns to us, they can look and see, oh, a lot of my neighbors have already identified this concern. Rather than making a new one, they can add to it if it doesn't cover all of their concerns, for example. And then also by utilizing the platform to incorporate the reporting of near misses and crashes that might not be reported to police. We hear oftentimes about how bicycle and pedestrians won't always report an incident to the police, and we want to encourage even near misses to get reported. So we want to give them a venue to do that through this neighborhood traffic calming program, where they can submit and identify locations where maybe our data isn't identifying it, but it still has some safety concerns that we want to look at. And then we'll have, and we'll continue to accept requests from the community through the online platform. But we wanted to ensure we had the most effective program moving forward before we really unleash this again. Related to the neighborhood traffic calming program, we will also be utilizing the information and findings from our ongoing traffic calming evaluation, which is, is trying to achieve the goal of developing people first streets. We have completed an existing conditions evaluation that included an assessment of the various traffic calming devices throughout the city, while also investigating current typical practices around the region by conducting a peer agency review. So we are currently evaluating and developing the design treatments we want in our toolbox based on the effectiveness to lower speeds and reduce crashes, which comes down to the ability to shift vehicles vertically or horizontally. But we also want cost-effective and quick and easy elements to implement in our toolbox that have a little impact to emergency response and maintenance as possible. So our traffic calming toolbox will now include raised crosswalks, speed tables, speed cushions, curb extensions, traffic circles, chicanes, pinch points, diverters, and pedestrian refuge islands. So how are these different from what we are currently using? Well, good question, glad you asked. So we're developing updated standard designs.
Limited stage left.
So
Pause for debate, sorry.
we are developing updated standard designs for each of those elements for consistent use, along with identifying practical applications for each of them. As an example of a change to a vertical element, we are transitioning from speed humps that we've traditionally used in the city to speed cushions, which are much more conducive to emergency vehicles and for maintenance purposes. We found existing horizontal elements to be the least effective due to a lack of restrictiveness as drivers learn over time to navigate the alignment at higher speeds. So what we're finding is we'll initially put something in, it'll slow people down because they're not used to it and it feels tighter and stuff, but over time, because there's nothing really shifting them horizontally or vertically, they get used to it and their speeds come back up again. So how do we deal with this? A speed cushion?
As opposed to a speed bump.
Sure, no, great question. So a speed hump typically goes all the way across the road, right? From one gutter pan to the other gutter pan, whereas a speed cushion is separated into separate elements that are spaced at a width in which the wheelbase of emergency vehicles can span it, and so they don't have to slow down, but typical cars don't, so they have to go over it with at least one wheel. So you strategically set them up in the street so that emergency vehicles can continue at speed, but everyone else has to slow down to go over them.
It's a punk band out of Inglewood.
Similar to REO Speedwagon.
But more punky.
It's only 8 o'clock, we can't get this punchy.
Side note, REO Speedwagon's from my hometown.
Which is a type of fire truck, if you were wondering.
Continue, Aaron, please.
REO Speedwagon's a fire truck.
So how do we address those horizontal elements? So horizontal elements will have new detailed designs that are more restrictive than existing elements by narrowing vehicle lanes and introducing horizontal shifts, both of which make a driver less comfortable and hopefully will then result in them slowing down. The traffic circles have been a key focus of the community, so I want to talk about those a little bit too. And our findings indicate this is still a very effective traffic calming tool. However, we determined these circles should not be used where there are bike lanes included. And the other issue that we have with our current design is that it doesn't have the right size diameter of the inner circle or of the radii in the corners. So we want to focus on those moving forward if we're to use those in other places. Some may wonder why crossbands, or also known as dips, are not included in our traffic calming toolbox. So while these do have a side effect of slowing traffic, that is not their primary intention. The primary purpose is drainage and diverting storm flows, which requires an extensive hydraulic analysis and potentially floodplain analysis at each location. Installation results in approximately 50 feet of road reconstruction needed on each side of the dip to transition road cross slopes. As a result, dips are not included in our toolbox because of the intensive design, hydraulic impacts, associated costs, and inability for a quick implementation. I do want to emphasize though that the toolbox, the traffic calming toolbox elements that I just listed are not all inclusive. The primary purpose is to streamline design and implementation, but we are able to implement other features for unique situations where necessary. So in other words, we're trying to identify the key elements that we want to use in most cases, but Littleton, being an older community and having some unique right-of-way restrictions and alignment issues, we always want to leave it open that we as engineers and planners can identify other uses that are appropriate as well. An important aspect of traffic calming for increased effectiveness is also the frequency and spacing of design elements. So as a part of the traffic calming evaluation, we identified several locations around the city where there's current safety concerns to develop concept designs. And some of these that we are looking at are a segment of Cayley Avenue, so kind of between Prince and Windermere. We're looking at a couple Lee Gulch crossings, both at Prince Street and Windermere Street. We're looking at a segment of Irving Street near Centennial Elementary School. It goes from Berry up to Bellevue. And then we're also looking at Stern Parkway, coming from Broadway kind of into the neighborhood from that past, I think it's Littles Park? Is that the park that's right there?
Creek Park.
Littles Creek Park, thank you. And then also the intersection of Ridge Road and Apache Street. And we picked these designs not necessarily to indicate a priority for implementation or necessarily even to implement at these locations, but we want to pick locations that, like I said, have existing safety concerns at them, either because of speed or other reasons, but also would be applicable to other locations similar to them around the city. We will also continue to utilize Quick Build as a tool to implement some of these elements that we want to test out in certain locations. So for example, if we have a location where we know we want to put traffic calming elements, but we're not quite sure what will be the best application there, we might try a quick build where we put in one of these applications, not as a permanent installation, but as a temporary, to test it out, check the data, get feedback from the community, and then decide if this is the right application, then to put in as a permanent installation. And then the one last thing I just want to comment about traffic calming evaluations is that we have been working with both police and fire to make sure that these elements will work for them as well.
Snowplows.
And snowplows, yes, thank you. Maintenance is always key as well. There's also been discussions recently about reducing the default speed limit in Littleton, which would also fall under the goal of people first streets. So based on what we have learned from other municipalities in the area, we will not obtain efficacy through simply changing signs, as this has been found to not necessarily change behaviors, which is really what we want to get to the root of, is changing how people drive. So we need to have community buy-in and incorporate infrastructure modifications at key locations along with changing speed limits. Some examples of how the city has accomplished this in the past: a couple years ago, we had a project along Mineral Avenue, the west section of it, out between closer to Platte Canyon. And what we did there is we did a lane reduction and reduced some of the through lanes there, along with reducing the speed limit. And that was a lot more effective to do both at the same time. Another more recent application would be Elati Street, where we got some concerns of why the speed limit was changing from 25 to 30 in another section and then back to 25. So we evaluated that, changed the speed limit along with implementing some traffic calming elements in that segment, so we felt it was more consistent and conducive to that segment of Elati. Let's see. By first working on community buy-in to safety, along with tying speed limit changes to infrastructure redesigns based on a lower design speed, we think will reinforce a culture of safety. So our recommendation is to incorporate the default speed limit into the Transportation Master Plan update plan for 2026. We think this would provide a more holistic overview of the city by allowing for a citywide speed limit evaluation for consistency before implementation. We could then work on the culture change side ahead of implementation and plan out better where speed limits should be reduced and where there is need for related signs. And then we could also learn more from other jurisdictions as to what has and has not worked for them, so that we're not repeating the same mistakes they did, hopefully. Now, there's also cost and time implications that we want to avoid duplicating. Just replacing signs in the city would probably cost around $30,000, which isn't a huge amount compared to other projects we do. But that doesn't take into account the staff time, which is already at a premium. There also needs to be an enforcement strategy that accompanies any changes to the speed limits, which for an understaffed police department is not currently possible. All right, now we want to talk about how to achieve the People First Streets, we also need to continue our partnerships with Littleton Public Schools. City staff has begun monthly coordination meetings with LPS staff to discuss the variety of projects and programming we are working on together. With LPS focused on a bond project at Euclid Middle School to improve circulation and access this summer, the city is also working to redesign and reconstruct that segment of Euclid Avenue that goes past Euclid Middle School all the way from Elati Street to Broadway. This complete street design that we're planning for this segment of roadway will provide safer accommodations for all users. Pedestrians and bicycles will have a shared use path and widened sidewalks along with raised crossings, while other traffic calming elements and balanced parking will be utilized to slow vehicular speeds. Runyon Elementary School is another example of a bond project for LPS where the city is working to assist with circulation, access control, parking restrictions, and safer crossings related to the work they'll be doing at Runyon. Other ongoing coordination with LPS includes expanding the school route wayfinding efforts to include Littleton Prep and Littleton Academy. You'll remember we installed all those blue signs around the city last year to help guide people, not only kids walking and biking to school, but let traffic know that this is a route that kids could be using so that they would be more aware. We want to expand that to the other 2 charter schools that we didn't capture as a part of that initial project. We also will continue to complete the school zone evaluation recommendations that we began last year. We've gotten through, I believe, 3 schools at this point, and we'll continue to go through them one at a time to update all the signage and other things that we talked to you in the past that we're going to do there. And then we're also planning future schools safety summits and Safe Routes to School programming projects. So you might remember last summer, we brought in LPS, all the principals and LPS administration to kind of talk through what our goals are as a city to work with them. We want to continue those type of efforts in the future. We think that could be an annual or biannual effort where we get together with LPS principals and staff, not just at the administration level, to really get a chance for them to tell us what they're seeing and what we can help them with and vice versa. What would a goal for People First Streets be without pilot and quick builds? So we will be testing and evaluating the effectiveness of various implementations this year as we did last year. So this is kind of an updated map to show you where around the city we'll be putting in different pilot and quick builds. You can see we have multiple crossing and intersection improvements along with some corridor improvements planned in 2025. These include a combination of new locations as well as previous project sites that were determined to need additional adjustments either due to data collection or public feedback through the community survey. Our pavement management program also includes mobility improvements by using the opportunity of a freshly paved road to modify or upgrade striping for bicycle facilities, such as adding buffered bike lanes where we only currently have striped bike lanes. And then protected bike lanes are also still planned as pilot projects in 2025 around Littleton. I know we talked to you about trying to get some of these implemented in 2024. Unfortunately, we got them designed, but couldn't get someone on board to install them for us early enough in 2024. So now we've created a strategy for the 5 locations that you see up on here for 2025. And we plan on implementing them kind of in 3 different phases. And it'll include up to about 2.5 miles of protected bike lanes. And we'll be testing out 5 different materials that you'll see in here. And these materials will be evaluated for effectiveness to protect bicyclists, for comfort, for ease of maintenance, and for costs. And again, just like we've been doing this year for all these pilot projects, we'll continue to put signs out. And you had that sign, but you didn't bring it over, did you? That'll identify a location as a pilot project or a quick build and has the QR code on there that someone can just quickly scan and then fill out a really quick survey to let us know how they use this facility and what they thought of it. So Shane will now continue to discuss other elements of the People First Streets goals.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Aaron. So last year, a year ago when we met with council, the directive was to go put things on the ground. And so that's what we did in 2024. In the second year of the Safer Streets Initiative, what we want to do is make sure that we're still putting things on the ground, but having a more comprehensive view of how we're doing that. So the way that we'll be doing that is through corridor studies. So the first corridor study that we're going to do is the Elati Street corridor study. And so like I said, the goal is to get things on the ground. So we'll still be using quick build materials, but what we're gonna do is kind of flip how we did public engagement from last year. So last year we went and put things on the ground and then talked to the public later. This year with the Elati corridor study, we're gonna engage the public right from the get-go, and it's gonna be very intense engagement, especially for people who live right on Elati Street. So that'll be a little bit different. But as we go through this corridor study, this will be the model for some other corridor studies that we're hoping to get grant funding for, which is our next slide. But the thing we want to emphasize is that this is just a corridor study. And so there'll be money to study it. There'll be a little bit of money to design areas that we identify as problem spots, but there's not money to construct anything as of yet. We obviously don't know what that budget will be, but just kind of ballpark estimates, if we were to put ADA compliant sidewalk on both sides of Alati from Littleton Boulevard all the way down to the Highline Canal, that would cost us roughly $7.5 million. So it's a good chunk.
A lot more than I thought you were gonna say.
Oh, okay, great, yeah, you could write us a check. Yeah.
And that number is just sidewalks, so that doesn't include
Right.
any bike infrastructure that might come out of the study as well.
Right, yeah.
It's not a small number, but it's still, it was.
Yeah, yeah. So that number gets a little bit bigger on the next slide. So as I said, the Alati Street corridor study will really set the stage for what we're hoping we will get grant funding for 10 additional corridor studies. So back in January, Kenna worked with one of our consultants to help prepare is it Raise or Build? I can't remember.
It was raised,
It was
and
raised.
then it was built.
Okay. Yeah, so every administration has to put their brand on it. So we think the overall cost of 10 additional corridor studies will be $3.2 million, with about 2.5 of that coming from grant funding and then the rest coming from local match. So we're expecting to find out, or we're hoping to find out in July of 2025 whether or not we were successful. And so we will go from there. But the idea again is to really comprehensively think about these fixes rather than just kind of doing areas that are low hanging fruit or areas that we can do things quickly, but really evaluating what are the biggest safety issues on these corridors and how do we deal with those first, so.
Underscore this, these are what will set us up for a decade plus improvements, make these all hang together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. Yeah, and many of these corridors were identified in the TMP as needing a more holistic study as well.
Yeah. And before we go from this slide, one thing to notice about the connectivity of this is that, some of the feedback we got from council, I think last summer, was that the projects we were doing didn't really connect. And so with this series of corridor studies, the idea is to create an internal network of bike corridors and sidewalk corridors, so people don't have to get in a car to go a couple miles, right? They can hop on their bike and trust that they'll safely get to their destination that's just a mile or two away.
Speaking of these corridor studies and setting us up for decades, what's the expiration date on these plans? Because I can see, we don't have the money to do any of the construction here, so if it's gonna take 15, 20 years to go ahead and get to this, is this corridor study for, let's just say, Prince, we don't have money for 20 years, are you gonna have to do another study in 20 years to do it? That's, where's the give take here? If we're just doing a big study, we don't have the money to construct it, we're just gonna do another study again in 20 years.
Yeah, that is a risk, right? In 20 years, a lot of things will change. So we're not just going to do the plans though and then sit on our hands. The goal is to do the plans, have engineering design for a few key locations along those corridors, and that hopefully the idea is that will set us up for other pots of grant funding, as well as looking, at future budgets to set aside money to slowly, chip away at the marble to create our masterpiece. So.
I've heard grant funding is gonna be hard to get moving forward. So do we have, I know that's the elephant in the room here,
It is,
the
yeah.
horse in the hospital or whatever, Steve.
Sorry.
What's the plan for if federal funding for something like this, because it goes away?
I think our initial strategy was to up the birth rate, because that's what we've heard is the new criteria for getting grant funding.
We were joking on that statement.
Kenna was like, that was not ready for prime time.
That's a risk we have to deal with. And with every administration, you have to play the game a little bit, so we'll see what the new criteria are and we'll adjust accordingly and emphasize the things that fit those criteria and do our best to receive grant funding, so.
And I'll just add, if we're not able to get that grant, we'll take our $640,000 local match and use that to do corridor studies on a couple of these, right?
Yeah, I think the idea is that we're going to re-strategize how we accomplish these, and so it may be a more incremental pace of doing 1 or 2 corridors at a time. Prioritizing based off of the highest need corridors first. We do have that local match set aside already, so we have $640K that we can use. We're also looking at other, potential grant opportunities at the state and local level as well. There are more strings attached with some of those. With TIP funding, a lot of these corridors don't qualify for TIP funding because they're not the regional roadway network, which we don't need to get into minor details, but we're strategizing internally what it'll look like to slowly chip away at this.
Yeah.
So if we did have we actually probably do have a study for Powers, we made that one of the bike paths. If it's 10 years old, would you use that right now or would you go up for another study?
10 years old, no. but
You wouldn't use.
we wouldn't use it now without reevaluating, because a lot's changed in 10 years, if you think about it. Just look at the culture of our community. I mean, safety wasn't nearly as much of a focus, mobility wasn't nearly as much of a focus 10 years ago as it is now. We were talking 10 years ago about putting in, just bike route signs and putting in sharrows on the
Yeah,
road.
that's what we did with power, that's why I mentioned powers, because
Right.
that's what we did.
And that's just not the approach that's gonna get everyone out biking, everyone to be comfortable. And this, we're talking about not just, the people that wanna go out and do recreational biking, but families that wanna bike together and things like that. And that's what we're trying to achieve at this point with the network, is how do we get people from their home to those regional trails that we have in our city, or to destinations like Shane was saying, whether it be to downtown or to schools or to shopping and things like that. We're trying to expand the culture of people using other means other than vehicles to get around town.
Right, I understand that, that's what I'm trying to say is, are you confident that you can construct, cause it's gonna take construction on these corridors within 10 years, because if not, this is kind of a waste of a study if you're saying you're not gonna use a 10-year-old study, we're doing a study and then we gotta wait 10 years to get funding. Why are we doing this then? I'm not
Yeah.
saying we shouldn't do it, but this is my gripe with all the plans that we keep putting out, because we have all the plans and then we don't have funding to do anything for 10 years and we need a new plan.
The other side of the risk is that if we don't have a corridor plan, is that we do things kind of haphazardly and end up kind of, it bites us because we've done something like, oh wait, we really should have thought about this. It also doesn't set us up well for future grant opportunities because, the people with the money, they wanna see that you've put some sort of skin in the game, that you're prepared to do it. And so if we have no plan at all, then the risk is that they'll say, hey, thanks for applying, but until you have some sort of document or design, we're just not interested in funding your project. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
I heard Shane say that on any of these corridors, there will likely be higher priority areas that you can do the highest priority work on, but you're doing it with the foresight of a corridor plan.
I will say too, I think these types of corridor studies are something newer that we're bringing to the city, whereas, for example, like our past bike ped master plan that was published in 2011, which Aaron was referring to, which was really focused on like routes and signage, didn't have the same level of community engagement and detail on these corridors. So I do think there would be more longevities with these corridor studies, but I think that is a great point that we as staff need to think internally of, maybe we need to narrow our focus on some high priority corridors and really think through study through implementation. And that's a conversation we can
It shouldn't
continue
be
to
done
have.
and not necessary, I just wanna make sure that we're not, as we've mentioned earlier, we have, like with HPC, we had this, and it wasn't a plan like this, but it was idea with code amendments, and then they kinda just get lost and don't get used, so I don't want that to happen. That's $3 million, that's what I want.
Just to reiterate the mayor's point too, I think the reason Public Works very broadly amongst all of your transportation and infrastructure projects was so successful and has been so overwhelmed with constructible work in the past couple of years is because y'all had the foresight to put the planning documents into process, not knowing that we were all going to get some sort of windfall in infrastructure funding in the preceding years. And you're right, to your point, it is a gamble, I think, I think the point being here is that we just need to be strategic about that gamble, looking 10 years into the future, saying, where is the direction of some of this where is the direction of the federal funding? Where is it going? What are the priorities? What is that going to trickle down to us to get, honestly? But it is a gamble, and it's something I think it's fair for all of us to kind of know and acknowledge too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is an issue we'll bring up with the consultant we have on the allotted corridor study and think about how do we future-proof these studies as much as possible, as much as we can. That's good feedback.
So the allotted study's not on that map, but it's definitely gonna happen.
Yes, we already have a consultant,
That's already started.
Yeah,
We have a kickoff this week. This map was from our grant application, so that's why
Yes.
Alani was not included.
Okay,
So if you're free Thursday, we have our kickoff meeting.
I'll be there. I think I'll be there.
All right, well, yeah, so our goal is to come back in July with the Safer Streets update and tell you we were successful in getting study funding, but we shall see, so.
You better follow through on that.
Okay.
And if not, we'll have a different plan.
That's
back.
right.
Where did Shane go?
He's on vacation now.
He's with the chief.
That's
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
that's right. All right, so one of the things, so with all these quick build projects and studies that are gonna recommend quick build projects is that we have the potential that we're creating a little bit of a bottleneck when it comes to maintenance and operation. So the nice thing about quick build projects is that we can go build them quickly, right? We can put them in the field within a couple weeks, as the name, suggests. The problem is that it takes more maintenance on the back end to keep them up. So anytime it snows and they get hit by a plow, right, there's pieces of plastic all over the street, right? Or anytime it snows and a truck hits it, right, runs over it, it breaks and you have to go fix it. So the quick build projects are good because we can quickly address a safety issue and slow down traffic and change driver behavior. The bad side is that, we don't wanna create so much maintenance that, our maintenance team is just overwhelmed and they can't deal with, other projects or just dealing with pilot projects. So, we're starting to address that. One of the things that we've done is we have a new full-time employee in our streets operation crew who will be, focused kind of on maintaining some of these pilot projects. We also have a new piece of equipment that will specifically be used to plow these protected or semi-protected bike lanes with this, temporary infrastructure. And as part of those additions, in the spring and summer, we'll be working with the operations crew to come up with an SOP for what that looks like. How do we design it so it's not a huge inconvenience for them? How do we deal with this stuff? How do we get ahead of the maintenance issues that these quick build projects can cause? So.
And I will say on that front, we are tracking the maintenance concerns of snowplows hitting some of these delineators. We're tracking that, and as part of our pilot projects this year, we're also looking at reevaluating our existing pilots to make sure that we make adjustments so that a snowplow is not hitting it every time it snows. So we are working with them closely as well.
Good.
All right, culture change, this big buzzword I feel like that we keep throwing around, and so I kind of want to dig into what exactly is culture change and what does that mean for safer streets. On its most basic level, culture change is the way that we as a society value traffic safety. And so what this is going to take is a fundamental shift in how we as an agency, other departments that we work with, and ultimately our entire community views traffic safety. And it also is going to take this ultimate overall belief that we cannot accept that traffic fatalities we have to accept that they're unacceptable and that they are preventable. And so what that's gonna take is changing the way people behave, and changing the way people behave takes changing the way people think about things, the way people believe in things. And so a lot of that is gonna take continuous communication with our public, and so if you wanna go to the next slide. We're gonna kind of break down a couple of the different ways that we're gonna be working on the culture change side of things. So we're gonna be doing a lot more programming and engagement with the community this year and moving forward. And so we'll break down a lot of the different things that you'll see from us moving forward this year. We also are gonna have more training and educational opportunities, both for the community, and internal opportunities. And so we are gonna explain some of those, and then David here is here to support me talking about our communication efforts. And like I mentioned, it's gonna take this continuous effort. And one thing I also wanna note is that it's gonna be really highlighting the positive culture that does currently exist. In order for us to change those beliefs, we have to remind people that there are positive things about our culture that are happening right now, and we have to elevate those things and capitalize on them. And so creating more spaces for people to enjoy that culture and support each other in that is what we're gonna be doing through this year. So if you wanna go to the next slide. We have a whole long list of events that we're gonna be doing, and this isn't even really all of it. We also have other ways that we hope to support other city events, like possibly providing bike valet at this Little Jam series and other events that people would, ride their bike to. And then we will have our Bike and Roll to School Day events, both in May and October. We'll have, of course, the big regional Bike to Work Day celebration, where we'll have our stations and gonna have donut holes and all the swag and all the great things to get people out. But we're also gonna have more educational events like a bike rodeo or learn to ride type area at the Twilight Criterium, kind of taking that Strider zone that we already have and elevating that into creating a larger space for kids of all ages to come and learn to ride. And then we'll talk about this on the next slide, but in early fall, we're gonna have it's called Traffic Garden here, but a ribbon cutting and bike rodeo for our practice parks that we will be building. And so I think I can jump to the next slide. That's something I really wanna highlight because I'm excited about these. I think they're gonna be a great resource to Littleton, and there's only a few in the state at this point. And they're traditionally called traffic gardens or safety towns. But we're calling them practice parks or Safer Streets practice parks. And they're a place for people of all ages, but especially our younger community to come and learn how to ride a bike safely or walk and roll safely around their community. And so we're working to really integrate a lot of the different traffic calming that we are using on our city streets into the design so that it's a real life experience for people at all ages to come and outside of the roadway, get on a bike or walk or roll and experience this infrastructure in a really safe environment, completely away from a car. And so the two locations, we're doing them at our Powell Middle School and East Community Center. And both of those are on their play pads, so like where you've got the basketball courts. And so again, we'll have a bike rodeo when we have those completed and hosted with Bicycle Colorado, doing some trainings and education for kids. And hoping to do more types of rodeos like that, or a rodeo is basically a learn to ride experience for kids. And so we want to create more of those events around a year-round type thing. And then we're also working with LPS to do more integrated education within their curriculum. There's a Choose Safe curriculum that's for high schoolers, that's more around safe driving education. But we also want to look at how we can engage with our younger generation and educate them more in their PE classes or things like that. And then
So let's say with that, Robert, maybe you can help us with LPS rather than have the swimming requirement, have a bicycle requirement.
Well, everything I've been told is the swim requirement's out the door, so I'll talk to him about replacing it, so.
And lastly, like I mentioned, our communications, hopefully you're not tired of hearing from us because you're gonna keep hearing from us a lot. Not only through our normal lines of communication with social media, but also of course through the Littleton Report, both print and online editions. David has this great word on the street that he's gonna be starting to publish. How frequently are you gonna do those?
So the Word on the Street program it's testimonials. If anybody remembers, a couple of years ago, we did a great series on homelessness called In Their Words. So Word on the Street is where we're gonna be hopefully talking to folks who use our street network outside of cars, folks who walk or bike or use mobility devices or push strollers, whatever that may be. And so we're looking at probably about one of those a month for the time being. We've got, that's David Sakris, that's our first one, which is going out this week. And so yeah, we are interested in, we want to be getting a little bit away from the folks in government telling everybody else and making sure that we're hearing from the community and sharing those stories back to the community.
Can you get Murray from Sesame Street to do Word on the Street?
I take recommendations, sure.
Yeah, exactly like David said though, hearing from our community is something that we're gonna be doing a lot more of when it comes to our communications, when it comes to this PSA video that I've mentioned here. We really want to try and communicate with the public more from the public. They want to hear, we want it to be from their neighbors that are getting this message across that we need safer streets for everyone. And so, getting our safety champions within the community to come and work with us on the communication side of things is something that we really want to do a lot more of this year. Another thing that we are doing when it comes to our pilot projects and all of the sort of construction that you're going to be seeing a lot more of this year is making sure that we get the word out to the public beforehand when that's coming, the construction's coming to their community. And so you'll see there in the upper right hand is a postcard that we are gonna be mailing out to the vicinities of these pilot project locations when it's, due to be constructed, so that these people are aware that there's something changing in their neighborhood, and it can send them to a website to learn more about the benefits and the data collected and what changes are occurring. And so we hope that that transparency with the community is something that's received well. And then lastly, we also are working on this refresh to the overall Safer Streets branding. We feel like the initial logo is a little bit car-centric, and so we're working to develop a more comprehensive and inclusive symbol that kind of gets across the ethos of what Safer Streets Littleton really is. And so stay tuned. We hope to have a more comprehensive like brand package for that as well, so that when we come to you with presentations or we're putting out any sort of materials related to Safer Streets, it's all really consistent in that visual messaging as well. And then last little thing I'll note is that with all of the traffic calming, all of the new things that you're seeing coming onto the streets, we also want to involve video messaging more, not just getting things out with word and just photos, but also trying to get out in the field and creating how-to videos of how to actually navigate a lot of the things that we are installing on our roadways that might be new to some drivers or people walking and rolling.
All right, so goal 3 is data-driven decision making. You can go to the next slide. So there's a lot of data that we work with, but I'm just gonna highlight a couple things on this slide. Probably over 90% of the data that we collect and use to make decisions is in 3 categories. It's volume, speed, and crash data. That's because 1, it's the easiest to collect, and it's also the most indicative of a safety issue. So why do we use data? Why do we try to strive for data-driven decision making? Well, there's a lot of reasons there, but 2 that I think that are worth hammering home is first is the equitable application of city resources. So you guys have heard the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease or gets the oil. A lot of times in the community, we can have one area that has where people have the time or have the resources to engage with the city a lot more than another area of the city. But if we go and look at the data for these 2 theoretical complaints, we may discover that, hey, even though the residents over here have been contacting the city a lot, that's not as big of a safety issue as what the data is showing for this issue over here that maybe one person sent an off email about. So we want to make sure that we're actually addressing safety issues in an equitable way, and data is the way that we do that. So you can go to the next slide. So we took data for the 2024 pilot projects. There's about a dozen locations that we took a series of data readings. These are just 4 that we wanted to highlight. And before we dive into these, kind of an overview of how we collect data. So when we get an issue and determine that there is some sort of, or when we get a complaint and determine there is some sort of safety issue there, we start with control data. We go and collect data when to see what is the issue. Is it speeding? Is it volume? Something like that. And we do that for about 2 weeks. Then after we develop some sort of solution to the problem, whether it's a quick build or something else, we go and collect data for 2 weeks immediately following the installation. And then we wait, use these signs this summer to get feedback from the community after that initial 2 weeks, observe, do things like that, and then go back 4 to 6 months later and collect another round of data. Because what we found is that when you put something new in the roadway, that initial 2 weeks, everybody slows down because it's new and confusing. But like Aaron mentioned, if they don't have to, go up over a bump or steer around something, those speeds return about after 2 weeks. And so that's how we do, that's our process for data collection. So I know we're kind of already over time, but so
We
I think.
expected it, don't
Yeah.
worry.
Okay, all right.
Oh, surprised.
You can blame chief, it's all his.
Yeah, right. So these are just 4 of the 12 pieces or projects that we collected data on, but each of them is thematic of some of the things that we're seeing, the trends that we're seeing in the data. So Prentice and Elmwood is what we'll call kind of a lighter touch crossing improvement, and that facilitates crossings from that neighborhood south of Cornerstone Park up into Cornerstone. And so we narrowed up a crossing there, put a few other things. We did see a good trend in that, 6 months after the installation, speeds were down 4 miles an hour, looking at the 85th percentile speed. That's a little bit fast for a park crossing, so that's one we'll continue to monitor, but we were encouraged to see the change in speed there. The next one down is Lake and Stern. So if the first one was a light touch, you may know Lake and Stern, if you've driven through it, is a bit of a heavier touch. So we also saw a 4 mile an hour decrease in the 85th percentile speed. But in that one, we really got that 85th percentile speed down really close to the speed limit, close to 25 miles an hour, which is what we like to see in park crossings. You'll notice the difference there on the right column is the positive feedback. And so we'll get into that in just a second, but that's one of the other pieces of data we're collecting as perceptions of these pilot
Can you
projects.
just explain the difference between the average speed, which is every single speed you track, and then the 85th is just it doesn't include the 15 highest percent?
Yeah, so the average essentially is right in the middle, right? But the 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of the cars are traveling at or below. So that's kind of an industry standard when it comes to evaluating speeds, and so that's why we.
So the average speed is 28 miles, but 15% of the cars going there are going faster than 33 miles an hour.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. The next one, Irving Street, so this is a good example of one that we're coming back to in 2025. We're actually on our second iteration currently, going into our third iteration. This is one where we got a resident complaint, collected data, said that there was a speeding issue. We added bike lanes 2 years ago, added buffered bike lanes last year, collected data both times, and the speeds are just kind of creeping up. So the feedback is positive. People like that there's a dedicated bike facility. That Irving Street is a school route, so they like that. But obviously, we don't want to just put something in that makes people feel great without actually solving the problem. So this year we'll be readdressing Irving. And then finally, Stern Parkway is another crossing there at Littles Creek Park. Again, we like the minor dip there in speeds, but the 32 mile an hour, 85th percentile speed is a little faster than we'd like, so we'll continue to monitor that in 2025, so.
These four, you said there's 10 of them up around?
There's what?
There's 10 of the signs up around the city, and you picked these four?
So there are about a dozen pilot projects that we collected data on. The feedback signs are a separate issue.
Sorry, of these projects, so.
Yeah,
So
there's about a
my
dozen.
question is, are these the best responses or best feedback / biggest drop in speed? So why did you pick these four versus?
Yeah,
just trying to see,
because
are you
they
cherry
kind of-
picking the information?
No, definitely not. And we have a hidden slide if we wanna, I mean, I've got all that.
No, I was just wondering, is this?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
The mayor asked you to stay longer.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, so each of these kind of represents what we're seeing with a few of our pilot projects, and so we picked these out because we thought they represented it. So we're seeing some where we like the speed decreases, right? Some where we're putting things in, but we're just not seeing the results, and so we have to go back. And so that's why I kind of picked a smattering.
More than the numbers, we want to just show you some of the data and the methodology that we're using to evaluate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these were also chosen too because there's some differing public opinions. So we
Yeah.
wanted to give a variety. I will say that the memo included in the council packet that reviews the 2024 Safer Streets program has more detail from the public survey. So if you want to peruse that later, there's lots of detail.
So there was an option for more than yes, no in the public survey. But you have some qualitative feedback.
Yeah, it was, go ahead.
Yes, so the pilot project survey.
Segue, thank you for asking that.
Great, thank you, Robert. Yeah.
Thank you for asking that question, Robert.
As opposed to the mayor who's like, stop.
Switch roles here.
We asked some very specific questions, and then there was also an opportunity for open-ended comments. So this here, with the question specifically on this slide, we asked, how has this pilot project impacted safety at this location? So we're looking at that perception of safety. Whereas this is taken from some of those open-ended questions.
And generally with the feedback, so we got about 250 responses while we had these signs up. And generally there are kind of two camps of responses. So there was the one camp that said, hey, we love the safety improvements here. We're seeing the change in traffic behavior for those ones where there was a change in traffic behavior. And then the other camp was, hey, we really don't like the way this looks. It doesn't look great. And so that's something we'll be addressing in 2025 with the next year, the Safer Streets Initiative. So we'll be seeing one, can we kind of limit some of the things and still get the same impact, right? Do we have to put as many delineators? We're also looking at materials. Are there other materials we can use that maybe not only get rid of that visual clutter, but maybe are more resilient? So we're also addressing the maintenance issue at the same time, so. All right, so speed feedback signs, so you've probably seen these at various locations. We have 15 locations throughout the city where there are speed feedback signs. We started installing these late April, early May of last year and kind of went through the summer. So we install these all over the city on kind of different classifications of streets. And really what we were trying to do is kind of see, all right, let's collect this data and see what the results are after these, from when these signs are turned off to when the signs are turned on. And so when we installed them, they were kind of in control mode where they were installed, they were collecting data, but there was no display. They weren't giving any feedback to the drivers on their speed. We did that for 2 weeks and then turned them on and then pulled data for December, which depending on when they were installed is about 4 to 6 months out, that same kind of process that we have for data collection, and found, generally speaking, that there wasn't a huge change in driver behavior, that we saw on average a 1 mile an hour decrease when it came to the driver speeds in these areas. So these are a very good tool for collecting data, and especially for conducting kind of longitudinal studies. Over time, we can see, how those trends maybe go up and down. But as far as impacting driver behavior, unless there's a change to the infrastructure or some sort of enforcement, we're not seeing any of that based on the data we have.
Cause I noticed, cause I live right around the corner from the one on Windermere, northern one. It's not on all the time, is it collecting data all the time, or is it only showing speed? Do you have it set up so you have it blank for part of the day, or it is blank for part of the day when cars go by? Tell me about that.
That's a good question. It should be providing feedback all the time and collecting.
Just not.
Okay, all right, well, that's good
But it
feedback.
does occasionally, it's just kind of intermittent.
Okay.
It has limits depending on what the speed is.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember how we set them up?
If you're going too fast, it doesn't tell you.
Yeah.
Over 50, it won't tell you.
You're not seeing it over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it only
When I was walking, I was pointing, the cars going by, I would point, I don't think that helped them either.
Like, what are we pointing?
We can also check to make sure they're all.
I've just noticed a few times, I'm like, hey, it's not on, so, that's all.
We have it not work for you, but.
Ah, okay.
Awesome. And then, so this slide is about a little bit of a preview for our updated crash report. So this right here shows an overview of crash statistics over the last 5 years, so 2020 through 2024. And to add some context to these numbers that you're seeing here, the number of crashes, serious bodily injury, and then fatal crashes. In terms of the rest of the metro area, these are fairly low numbers. So we looked at a few other metro communities, and per capita, we're half than some of the other big communities in Littleton. That said, obviously those 11 fatalities, right, and the 67 people who were seriously injured, we're not making light of that by any means, right? Those are people's mothers and brothers and sisters and fathers who lost their lives or had their lives permanently changed. And so the goal, is obviously to continue to lower that number of crashes until we get to the goal of consistently having, zero fatalities or serious injuries every year. And this updated crash format that we're coming up with will help us do that by not just looking at kind of what types of crashes and where they happen, but starting to explore crash trends and see if we can kind of take areas that have high crash patterns and say, okay, where do those patterns exist in other parts of the city, and be a little more preventative in how we address safety. Another important thing to point out on this right side here about how we use crash data and how we react to it. Of these 6 intersections that are ranked as the top intersections for bike and ped crashes, we are touching 4 of those intersections, either through design or construction projects, some of which we're leading, some of which CDOT is leading, but we're responding to the crash data. So.
Everybody's favorite, little police enforcement, and we did that last year. Last year, we provided several overtime shifts where the officers would just focus on school zones. 56 shifts. We saw 62 warnings and 144 citations in those 56 shifts. This year, we're working on filling 2 more traffic officers. I know the chief has explained this, but when a traffic officer is working, if there's an accident anywhere in the city, that traffic officer gets pulled to go handle that accident. So they can't then do the enforcement in the school zones. With 2 more, they'll be able to focus on the school zones and some of these high traffic areas or high accident areas a little more. And then we're also looking to work with all the stakeholders, the city, and Littleton Public Schools on ways that we can continue to implement bike safety. We have posted we will post for one of those traffic positions next week, and what that is an internal posting. The officer then has to decide if they want to put in, and we'll be able to test for that here in a few weeks. So I think we'll be able to fill one of those 2 positions in the next month or so. So that's good news.
So I feel like these were positions that were authorized when I first started on the council. We authorized the increase in positions for the police, and it feels to me like traffic has not been the highest priority for staffing. Is that accurate?
It's fairly accurate, yes. So there was an increase in staffing of patrol. But what we've had to do is anytime there's a shortage due to an accident, injury, somebody getting hurt, vacation, training, then we have to pull that officer from somewhere, and it's easier to pull from these special assignments like the special enforcement team or traffic to fill the street, to make sure that the streets are appropriately staffed. So with the increase, when we get to that number, I think the number is 88 officers, then the hope is not to have to pull from traffic.
Yeah, I feel like, is it possible to have a conversation around priorities with traffic? I mean, I feel like within our city, the two most deadly things are traffic and overdoses. And so how do we think about prioritizing more? And I understand there's more to police work than what's deadly. And so I'm not trying to, but I just wonder if we can have a conversation about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think we do prioritize traffic, but the biggest complaint we get is the amount of traffic. So there's obviously.
We get that complaint too.
There's obviously nothing that a police officer putting more police on that will do to that.
Right.
But with two more officers in the traffic team, I think then we can not pull from traffic, when we have shortages elsewhere in patrol.
I also want to clarify, I know the chief and the division chief are working to kind of find that one that we can start to fill. But there were two traffic enforcement or traffic dedicated officers that were part of that proactive safety package from a couple of years ago now. And at the end of that process, we realized that we had, I won't go into lots of detail, but in order to fund some behavioral health roles and the co-responders and our case manager role, we had to back off from a couple of the dedicated traffic spots. We moved forward with the patrol and the co-responder programs. So we're still trying to actually find budget for additional traffic officers for that unit. So the plan had been, we still plan to follow through, that now that we have dedicated revenue for the behavioral health and co-responder program, we want to bring that option back to council where we can use that money for the behavioral health roles and then reconsider those last couple of police officer roles will be dedicated to traffic, but that's a discussion for.
I think to Robert's point, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I think when you pull from traffic, it kind of says that's the lowest priority, is we don't need that, we can put it somewhere else. I think if there's another way, if there are other areas to pull from, so traffic isn't the one that's being left behind. And to think almost more like an airline that overbook seats, you know that you're gonna have people out, all this stuff, so can we get it so we don't have to pull from anywhere? We have this plan of saying, hey, we know we're gonna.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want. That's exactly what we want to happen with the increase of officers, so that we don't have to pull from traffic, or the special enforcement team who's doing some important work too, and that the streets are always appropriately staffed. The things we can't plan for, the injuries, the long-term FMLA leaves, the things that we don't know are gonna come, but we definitely can plan for vacations and.
You at least have data that you can estimate, we might have one or two of these a year, you know what I mean?
I wish it was just one or two,
Yeah,
but.
or whatever it is, I don't know what the number is.
I also wanna note that when we're staffing an officer, we're staffing an officer to be in the field for a certain amount of time. If we could take that budget and instead put it towards infrastructure that is self-enforcing and it's 24/7, or we could also look at the other idea of which we've talked about is automated enforcement. When we're talking about enforcement, on our streets, I think that there is this idea of seeing them there is one thing, but that's when we're coming back to the culture change side of things. If we can work to shift the way we as a community are thinking about traffic safety, and we are being more accountable to one another and ourselves, and we also have then the roadways that are making it so that it's self-enforcing behaviors, we're taking less of the load off of our officers who are needing to have, more budget to have more of them. So I just think that if we think about it that way of.
I guess my goal is, when I grew up, when I was in college, I lived in this neighborhood, so 1984. And the reputation of this neighborhood is if you speed in Greenwood Village, you're gonna get a ticket. And because, and there were other reasons why you got a lot of tickets in Greenwood Village, but I would really like the reputation to be if you speed in Littleton, you get a ticket. And I want that to be our reputation. And I understand that that's not kind of a negative culture change and maybe not the positive culture change we're talking about, but that's my goal, is to get to that place.
Cause couldn't the culture be whether, rather than we are enforcing them, what if we are then, before that behavior is being made, they're making this poor behavior decision, we are making it such that they are not able to do that with the built environment. We have created an infrastructure so that they are able to do that speeding in the first place.
I'm trying to push for the all of the above strategy, and I feel like, you know, the mayor's questions around the corridor studies and the ability of us to actually pay for the infrastructure we're gonna identify in those corridor studies, that's 20 years away. And so I would like us to have a robust kind of traffic presence, and so that's just my priority that I would like to talk as much about as we
I
can.
don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I fully agree with you.
No, I know, they're not mutually exclusive. I'm trying to advocate for all of the above.
Right, I know.
And I want robust traffic enforcement to be a component of that.
I mean, I've never believed I would be saying this, but, you know, the police officer is less expensive than, you know, $150,000 is not gonna get a whole lot in, as far as rebuilding the, you know, sidewalks and bike lanes along Elati there, so there's kind of a balance.
So we can more sustainable.
I agree with you 100%, we just don't have that right now, and I'm trying to think of, and sometimes it's a balance there, but it's a good, kind of collaboration between the different departments, so.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that everybody's here for this big conversation.
That word, collaboration.
Thank you for the segue, Mayor.
6 more slides.
Trying to make up for the last one.
Thank you for hanging in with us. We are on our last goal, which is collaboration and resources.
47 more slides.
Like 5 to 7. This goal is really focusing on strengthening our partnerships and coordination, both internally within city departments, like within Public Works, with communications, with PD, as well as outside of the city, so with community organizations, with Littleton Public Schools, with our neighboring communities that we work closely with our regional partners like DRCOG and CDOT, who also fund us. And that's to align our efforts and our policies and resources for safer streets. So a little more about collaboration with partners. This is just a snapshot of some of our collaboration. This is not all encompassing, like we don't have Colorado Center for the Blind or South Suburban listed here, but those are also very important partnerships that we work closely with. So Transportation Mobility Board, they are a key entity within this work. We had a very successful study session with City Council last year, talking specifically about Vision Zero, and the TMB actually created their own set of goals around safer streets. So we are continuously engaging with them. As we mentioned, we'll be bringing the strategic plan to them in 2 nights' time. So if you want to hear this again, come on down to TMB. We have our Traffic Safety Committee, which is comprised of internal staff. So David sits on it, all of us on the transportation team. Our traffic unit from PD attends regularly, sometimes city manager's office. And so that's really where we can talk about safety issues, really dive deep into the data, talk about enforcement, places that we need more enforcement, et cetera. Littleton Public Schools is one of our main partners with this work. We've really strengthened our partnership with them over the last year. We are starting monthly coordination meetings with them. As Aaron had mentioned previously, there's a ton of ongoing infrastructure work along with our programming work as well. So we work very closely with them and are super happy that we have a really great partnership with that entity. And then a new partner we have this year is Advent Health, and so they'll be helping us with that Choose Safe educational programming that Emily mentioned before, and also utilizing resources, potentially having some donations from them. On the donation, one thing we didn't mention when we were talking about the protected bike lanes is that we're actually getting a donation from a local business in Littleton for some precast concrete barriers. So that's another partnership that we're hoping to continue and strengthen as we move forward. So touching a little bit on funding at this point, so a recap of our 2024 funding. We received $2.3 million last year, and we were able to spend about 60% of that, so $1.4 million. And that went to things such as the speed feedback signs, our pilots and quick builds, the school zone and traffic calming evaluations that you have heard about, and then the 2 additional personnel we were able to hire. The rest of the money that we weren't able to spend has been encumbered, and we plan to spend it in 2025. So this includes local match for those corridor studies, implementation of the school zone and traffic calming evaluations, additional school route signage that Aaron had mentioned for Littleton Prep and Littleton Academy, and then the installation of those protected bike lanes along 4 different corridors. And then looking forward to 2025, we have a $1 million budget for this year. So the majority of that money will be going to those pilot and quick build projects. We have also set aside local match for those corridor studies as well. We have some money set aside for consultant support, using that for things such as the strategic plan or our annual crash report. Some personnel miss, we are actually going to be hiring an intern to help us with data collection, and a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit that it's more time intensive for us, but it would be great for a grad intern to learn. Events and programming that Emily mentioned, and then our volume and speed data software, Urban SDK. So all in all, we have $1 million here, plus the encumbered funding from 2024 puts us about at 1.8 million. And I will pass it on to Shane to talk about next steps.
Sure. So a big part of the next steps will be the transportation master plan. So our strategic plan, Safer Streets, all of the transportation projects that we do will get wrapped up into the transportation master plan. And so just a few updates on kind of where that sits. So we're still planning on a 2026 transportation master plan update. So we've already engaged the Transportation and Mobility Advisory Board, the TMB. They're going to spend the first kind of 2/3 of this year helping staff shape the scope, what the qualifications are for the consultant or consultant teams that we hire, to make sure that we really get kind of the feedback of that board as we go forward with the TMP update. And so that'll be exciting. So some portion of every meeting up through July will be focused on the TMP update, and we're kind of planning in an ideal situation where we could launch that January 1st of 2026. So that's kind of the schedule that we're working on. So, but before we do the TMP update, we will be doing a TMP report on progress. So if you were on council a couple of years ago, we gave a report on what progress has been made since the TMP was passed in 2019. We'll be doing another one of those that will cover 2022 through 2024. That work will begin in Q2 of this year, and so as soon as that report is ready, we'll deliver it to council. I'll be happy to chat with you guys about what's in that report, the progress that we've made. But just a couple highlights from the data that's in that report, the data that will be in that report that we've kind of looked at preliminarily. So first, the high injury network. So in the 2019 TMP, we identified 14 intersections that are part of the high injury network or high injury intersections. We're touching 12 of the 14 of those intersections. So that's a pretty good number. If we could do that every time we have a TMP update, hit 12 out of the 14, we'd be in pretty good shape. So those are at various stages, but you'll start to see those projects come online this year. Santa Fe and Mineral is a great example. The resident and business satisfaction survey, so looked at that. Unfortunately, transportation satisfaction is down a little bit from 2022, mostly in the area of transit. That's down a lot, which obviously we have a little bit less influence over. But as we go into the TMP update, that'll be one of the things as we do a very intensive public engagement process is kind of understanding that, what things, are you unsatisfied with? One of the highlights from that, though, is that for the first time, about 1 in 5 residents identified bike and pedestrian safety issues as a major priority for transportation in the city of Littleton. So there's a little bit of culture change there that we talk about, that residents want a safe bike and pedestrian city. And then finally, some bike and ped progress. Since the last report on progress, which was a couple years ago, we've installed over 1 mile of new bike facilities. Most of that has been buffered. It's not quite protected, which is the gold standard, but it's getting very close. And then we've installed about 1,000 feet of additional sidewalks. Some of that is brand new, some of that is widening, bringing it up to code or making it more appropriate for the adjacent land use, so.
Before we stop, because we're gonna stop. Do you have one more slide?
Wait, one more slide.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna go through all that stuff. What I really wanna say is, what I really love about the staff that we have here is you can tell that they're passionate about this work. And I think that the program is really maturing quite well. I mean, it's a really great collaboration with PD, with the public works staff and with communications. And I really feel like we're making progress in the right direction. So just a high level overview. If you have any questions on what we went over. We went over a lot of stuff. We're happy to take any questions now.
I just want to say, as you've seen, even after the first folks were seated, I was trying to get more of our team at the table. I want to recognize other leaders and members of the transportation team, Kimberly Dahl, Tim Weaver, and Kyle Morris, who are also part of this. I thank them for being here too. Oh, I'm sorry, Brent Thompson, our city engineer in the back. They didn't even see you. So this team is all about this. So thanks, Council. If you have any questions, we're all here for you.
Council, I've got some questions, but Council, any other questions?
Yes. There was the slide with the metrics that had the 4 samples for the quick build projects. What exactly how are we measuring success on those? Is it just getting people down to the speed limit? Are we looking for further reduction? What's that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's something that we're gonna, so right now our current thresholds are, we consider something to be a speeding problem when the 85th percentile speed is 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. In some areas, that's like on Santa Fe, that might be an appropriate metric to say, hey, this is a speeding problem. Near parks, that is probably not an appropriate metric, right? At that point, you're going way too fast if you're 10 miles an hour over.
Over the speed limit.
Right, yeah. So yeah, so as we developed, the TMP and in second year Safer Streets, we need to come up with standards that are a little more sensitive to the surrounding land use context. But that's how we're doing it now, is kind of that 85th percentile speed that's 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limit is kind of our threshold. So now any reduction is good, but obviously closer to the speed limit, closer to that 25 near parks is what we're striving for.
Okay. And then my follow-up question to that is, I think one of your examples, well, I can't remember which one it was. Sure. But you mentioned, okay, we're gonna go in, we're gonna adjust, we're gonna make some changes to try to reduce speed further. What exactly are those measures that you would take to make a little change?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that was Irving Street, and I'll turn it over to Kenna as kind of leader of that effort to.
Yeah, so
Say
Irving
details.
is a really great example. We actually started with Irving as a pilot project back in 2023. As Shane had mentioned, we striped bike lanes. Last year, we added buffered bike lanes. And this year, we will be adding protection to the bike lanes, as well as adding some mid-block traffic calming treatments as well. So we've added the facilities on, and that hasn't changed speed. So now we're adding some more vertical and horizontal elements to help try to get it to where we want it to be.
Okay. I guess with the bike lanes, we always want to be slowing down traffic, right? That's always good. But with bike lanes, if the gold standard is always going to be a protected bike lane, why are we? Is it a cost efficiency type thing to try some of the intermediate steps? I'm seeing nods.
I can take this, because it's more of a global question, right? We intended to get some of those pilot projects for protected bike lanes out last year because we want to first, since we don't have protected bike lanes anywhere yet, we want to first try out a bunch of different materials first to evaluate what do people like, what actually makes them feel safe, what can we actually afford, what can we maintain. And so we want to determine that first before we start putting in the same type of element everywhere around the city. So we want to get that test done first and see what the city likes and see what we can afford so that we can optimize or, cover as much of the city as possible. And really, some people would say the gold standard isn't protected bike lanes. They would say it would be taking bike lanes off the roadway, which we would call a trail or a cycle track, right? And where we have the right of way and space to do that, we are gonna be doing that this year. We have a couple different examples of where we're putting cycle tracks in. But that was part of what I talked about earlier about it has to be context sensitive, or has to be land use context sensitive to where we're putting in different facilities, right? We don't wanna put in a cycle track necessarily where it's barely gonna be used, when a shared use path would be just as effective, right? And we also don't wanna just put in protected bike lanes everywhere just to put them in if they're not gonna be utilized or not necessary on that level of roadway. So for example, roadways where we don't have a speeding problem, where people do feel comfortable, maybe they don't need a protected bike lane. Maybe just having them ride with traffic is acceptable. But then there's other areas like Mineral Avenue, for example, where people really want to utilize that because it's a very connective roadway where bicyclists want to get from light rail to the hospital, for example, and stuff, where, just striped lanes isn't gonna do it, and even buffer lanes isn't gonna do it. And that's why our goal on a street like that is to get to the protected eventually. But we wanna make sure we're putting in what's the most effective use
That makes a lot of sense, and that was such a good answer that I feel like my question was dumb now, so thank you for that, I appreciate it.
That was a good.
I would wanna follow up on that with, just 'cause it's the same topic, to kind of bring up what Emily brought up before. You know, if we're looking at, 10% or 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limit is, I don't wanna say acceptable, but it's it tells me our streets are designed incorrectly for the speed limit if we have it up there. So what other places in the US have been able to build their streets to get the people to drive at what is it designed for? Is there some place that, hey, when it says 25 miles an hour, it's 25 miles an hour? It's what people that drive feel safe.
I mean, it's not gonna be just with a sign, if it's just pure sign.
I'm talking about how the street's designed. People are going fast, but you get up 50 miles down Windermere because it's 60 feet wide.
There's probably like small communities across the country, but large scale communities, you do have Hoboken and then New York City, there's slow zones that they've implemented. It's a huge program that they've implemented across the city. It's an incredibly successful with sort of creating, like, narrowing up the entrance to those corridors and, speed tables and things like that, as well as, of course, then the signage.
Last time I mentioned Hoboken, I was sitting up there and I got yelled at for mentioning Hoboken.
It's a completely different.
But I know, that's what I'm trying to say, we're to design the whole
Right.
streetway.
I think it's hard because the way that, land use and transportation are interconnected, and so the way that our land use is designed in this city makes it harder to do things like Hoboken and New York City, where there's not a lot of, some people do drive cars, but a lot of people are transit dependent, walking and biking, and so.
It feels to me like we could learn a lot from the big city to our north's efforts. I mean, Denver's doing so much right now, and I feel that, I wonder if we could just learn, have an opportunity to learn from them what has been successful. Because I doubt there's many cities that have experimented more in the last 5 years than Denver. And I'm willing to guess there's some good lessons that we can learn from them if we just figure out who to call.
I think Boulder.
Well, but those are commies. I mean, Denver's not all commies.
Finally, I'm getting through to you.
Pam, you had a question?
I will say on that
I've been
point,
looking for over the.
I will say on that point, we as staff do communicate regularly with other jurisdictions like Denver, and as part of our traffic calming evaluation, the consultant did speak to Denver and Boulder and a couple other communities to talk specifically about their traffic calming. So we are in regular communication, because Denver's doing a ton with traffic calming and bike infrastructure, so.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think it's kind of how the city developed, when it developed. I mean, we have the wider streets, right, which makes you feel more comfortable. And if you go into Denver where they have the narrower streets and you have parking on both sides, people do not speed down those streets, right? So when I worked at Commerce City, we were experimented in a subdivision that they call it new urbanism, where all the streets were a max of like 30 feet wide. And so when you parked on those, right, you couldn't speed through the neighborhood. So it's just kind of how we developed, I think.
No, I want to move those streets here to build it so people, don't feel comfortable.
I mean, anecdotally, I think Denver is doing a lot. I mean, that's my bike back there and wherever it is, like I will be getting home by that. And so I ride around, there is some great things to learn from and that I do bring here. But I think, like, transparently, they were really focused on a number. They had that 125 miles of bike lanes they were trying to build out, and that's what they were focused on. I think what we want to focus on is the comfort level and the connectedness of the bikeway network that we're building out, not how many miles is it that we're trying to reach by a certain date. It's how comfortable and how protected are they for the people 8 to 80 in our community. And so I want to caution just looking at what Denver's done or any other community just because we see a lot. We want to definitely see it and then hear what is working and what can we apply. And, for example, they've done a bike lane with speed tables in Denver, like a protected bike lane. And I think that's something that we can learn and adapt and create a better version of here in Littleton from my experience riding it there. So, yes, basically.
Pam.
What's the transportation survey you were talking about? When was that? Where was that?
Yeah, so there was part of the resident satisfaction survey, and there's transportation-focused questions in there, so.
And did you notice a change from the last survey we did?
Yeah, so I looked at it and so it compares, like, this is the 2024 numbers, this is the 2022 numbers.
Yeah.
All of the transportation related stuff, I think with the exception of one, was down like 2%, so I don't know. I'm not a statistics guy, so I don't know if that's with the margin of error to say, oh, that's pretty much the same, but they all tended to trend down just a little bit, with the exception of transit that trended down a lot, so.
What do you mean by trending down?
So there would be like.
Less favorable.
Yeah, less favorable, so it would be like 44% said that, congestion was okay, and then, 2 years ago, and now it's only 42%, so.
On the sample size of what?
I'm not
That's
sure.
That survey, I think, at 400. So, but that's pretty close to there, it should be about 1.5, I think, for that, so it's right in there. I remember reading it, I can't calculate it, I read that, I didn't.
But you deal with it all.
Seems like we're putting a lot of effort into biking, and I bike a lot, and I don't see the bikes that you guys are all referencing, that everybody thinks we have this tremendous amount of cyclists in the city. Have we ever put like a gang camera on a TV to say, how many cyclists do we actually have going up and down the street? I just don't see it. And I get what we're trying to do, and I know maybe if we do all these things, we'll see more cyclists, but I don't know, maybe around the schools, but other than that, I just don't see it.
Yeah, so we have bike counters, and they're a little bit cumbersome to go install. They're like tube counters, but they specifically are sensitive enough to detect bikes versus vehicles. We have some cameras, but the cameras are just not great at detecting bikes right now. At all of our major intersections, those cameras are supposed to give us bike numbers, but we can go out there for an hour.
I imagine that's something you would do before you
Yeah.
start implementing all this stuff, to say, we get 5 cyclists a day on this road, why
Right.
are we?
So, but if
Focus.
that's the case, right, we only have 5 because what the current infrastructure is a painted bike lane or no bike lane at all, that's because
Like
people
Mineral
ages
for-
8 to
Mineral,
80
for
might not
example,
feel
there's-
comfortable
there's
riding on it.
There's great sidewalks on both sides of Mineral, so all the way from the station all the way up to the hospital. So, I mean, to spend money on Mineral, which is a high-speed road, I ride a lot and I feel very comfortable on that type of road, but for most people wanna ride on a sidewalk, right? When you get up to those, 50-mile-an-hour speed limits on that road. And so I just think, it sounds like you guys are doing the right thing, right? Let's make sure we're not spending money where there's not a lot of cycles.
Yeah, and so, especially in all over the city, but with a lot of these studies, one of the proposals we got on Alati was like, had a similar concern, I would say, is, we don't have any cyclists here, you don't have a built-out network, so what if instead of a dedicated bike facility, you have a large, like 10-foot trail on one side of Alati that runs up and down, because then you could bike on it, and then it also provides benefit to people who are walking, so.
Then you gotta look at the type of cyclist, right? If
That's
it's
true,
kids,
yeah.
right? Great, get it, but if it's somebody that feels, that's wearing, whatever they call us, what's the nickname for,
Lycra?
say it again,
Spandex or.
Spandex warrior or something like that. For those types of guys, us that are comfortable on the road, then it's a different, thing to design.
And what we're hearing from a lot of people when we do surveys and do outreach and stuff is people say, well, I would bike more if I felt comfortable. Or they say, well, I would bike to the regional trail rather than driving to the trail and then riding my bike if I felt there was a good connection and a safe way to get there. And that's, a lot of what we're trying to get at. We're trying to identify where are those corridors that will get people from their houses to those trail systems.
Mineral's another great
I think I
example.
heard Pam say that last year at the Criterium, you said you would have biked to the Criterium, but you didn't feel safe getting here.
Yeah, no, I avoid moving here.
And, we keep bringing up corridor studies, but that's another reason that we really feel these corridor studies are needed, is to talk to the community and talk to the residents that live on these streets of, what do you wanna see? What would you feel comfortable riding? Is it protected bike lanes? Is it an off-street trail? What is going to work for the community and really get people out there riding?
So I'm thrilled that the police are here and public communications are here, because my big anxiety about Safer Streets is that it's a public works project. And we're not gonna achieve the goal of cultural change or really any change unless it's a team effort. So I'm really, really grateful that you guys are all here working on this. And I'm really, really grateful that this focus on data and, you know, Pat's question is around data, but these, you know, just measuring the speeds and those kind of things. I do have a little bit of a worry that we need to keep working on justifying the changes that we do. I think there is a lot of it, and I would encourage you to work more with David to talk about, you know, he lists a lot of communication things, but I think there's also really a lot of power in the what we've learned. And I've heard Shane talk a lot about what we've learned is we need to do more vertical and horizontal kind of changes. And that's a change, and that's gonna really cause some consternation, and Aaron's heard some of my consternation about it. But I think part of our communication strategy should be what we've learned, because it demonstrates both that we're like data driven, and it also helps make the case for the changes we're putting in place. And so, anyways, I'm just thrilled that everybody's here and that we're trying to do this together. I don't want it to just be a public work thing. I want it to be a city thing, and I think this is great.
I do wanna point out there, I think you're absolutely right, Robert, but I do really wanna point out, you know, as far as communications, I've done a lot in terms of making sure that we are communicating regularly, that we are being transparent, that folks have easy access to the primary source documents that are being produced by this team. But I really gotta give a lot of credit to Emily on the culture change piece. I mean, she's really been leading the charge on, I mean, she's been very much at the forefront of a lot of the you know, the cutting edge of where a lot of this stuff has been, in terms of events, in terms of you know, the traffic garden and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I certainly can't do it without this team at all.
Well, I would say I'm grateful for Emily, and I feel like the TMB in the work the TMB did said one of the things we need is a champion to do this, and I appreciate Emily being at least one of the champions, because I feel like there's more than one champion here, but I'm grateful for that. I mean, I'm grateful for all of you guys that's passionate about traffic, so thank you.
Yeah, nothing else, you know, I wanna emphasize what Fran said, because the team that I have working with me now, they're all here tonight to show you how important this is to us. None of this happens without all 6 of us sitting here and the 4 people, soon to be 5, that are working in the field to help us implement all this stuff, which at times to them are like, you want us to do what? You know, and they've been great at working with us and stuff. But you know, I wanna emphasize Emily's point, which is we don't feel like any of this will really have a long-standing impression unless we get the community behind it 100%. And that's a key, and it's gonna take time to get there, but I feel like we can.
That's something, yeah, I just wanna note on that, like, cause traffic safety culture is something I have done a lot of research and it's one of my passions. And one of the things that I think we need to just take a hard look at reality is that all of this work is not going to happen overnight, and especially the culture change side of things. All research shows that, especially even in a small organization, just a couple hundred people, takes at least 5 years for really real substantial, sustainable culture change to actually start being noticeable. So I feel like, I know that's kind of a crappy thing at the end of the day to hear, because you're like, wow, I wanna see it tomorrow. And that thing, at the end of the day, that starts with us. Like, if you wanna see it tomorrow, then in how you are moving about community, how you leave tonight, think about your actions and how you are living the values of safer streets and how you are communicating that with your different spheres of people you interact with and on a day-to-day basis. Because that is gonna help us get closer to that culture change just a little bit faster. But we also have to be a little bit patient.
Yeah, I don't want to be too much longer, but I also want to reiterate a lot of the sentiment that you've been putting out this evening around the cohesion of that team, and would encourage you to continue on, because this is a long haul. Like, this is how our city is going to sustainably function from a housing, transportation perspective into the future. We cannot assume that if we just repair what we have, we will be a functional city, because we won't. Like, those numbers, we are working against forces that we cannot control for the most part. And I think this is how we adapt to that change and make it easier on ourselves in 20 years. So that being said, one of the things, Aaron, you brought up about near misses, I really,
like, it was something I felt really passionate about, is being able to collect that kind of near miss data, not just from a qualitative data collection aspect. It is a point of connection to where your city is listening to you. Like, you are scared, you're scared for your kids, you are scared for your parent in a wheelchair. And I think it's really huge, and I want you to keep re-emphasizing that, especially in a lot of the public communication materials. Like, when you have an experience, you know, crossing the street, riding your bike, pushing the stroller, tell us, and just re-emphasize that kind of over and over again, especially in our communication material, because I think if you are doing two things: you're capturing data you would not otherwise capture, but B, you are creating a conduit of communication and feedback that we absolutely need more than, I like the cameras and the sensors and everything like that, but like we have seen, it can only get us so far. The last thing I wanted to point out too is that, like, none of the work that I think that a lot of the great work, like we have been saying about grants and everything like that, that's been done in the last few years, couldn't have been done unless we had taken a risk in terms of planning. And I want to emphasize that it is a risk, right? Like, planning for corridor studies where we are diving off that diving board, but we do not know how deep the pool is and if that's going to be able to sustain us, like, is a real risk. And I think, you know, quite frankly, the opportunity for a lot of these grant related programs is going to be drying up at least in the near term. That doesn't mean forever, right? But in the near term, we need to consider that. And we also need to consider what is the dollar value of our needs, and not to stop the planning, to make sure that we are anticipating what the dollar value of that need is into the future. Because you're right, you know, we can't.
I wasn't saying stop the
No,
plan,
no,
I was
no,
making
no.
sure with the follow through, that's
I
what I
was saying, not to, and I was, sorry, I didn't mean to give that impression to say stop the planning, is
So
that.
Littleton Online will say that the
Yeah,
mayor
exactly.
said stop the
No.
planning, is that what?
No.
Hey, he's not a journalist anymore, don't let.
We can't stop doing the planning, not knowing where the construction funding is coming from. And I think this team has done a really good job at embracing that, and to know that there is an uncertain future. Our council can make that future more certain. We have the economic tools in our toolbox to make that future more certain if we prioritize it. Quite frankly, we may not be able to depend on outside revenue for much longer. We have to partner with economic development. We have to make sure we get the maximum amount of bike lane build, the maximum amount of sidewalk build for every new business that comes into town. We have to capitalize on all those aspects of revenue generation for our projects in the future, more than we have. And I know we push in a lot of different directions, but we're gonna have to look internally to say, how important is this really? So, yeah, keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let's go. Hey! Yeah, I haven't asked Mike, I wanna say thank you it was a good presentation, there was a lot there, you guys got through it. So thank you with that, the memo and everything from last year, was great, there was lots of information there. So there were a couple of things I just wanna, you may know I get a little critical sometimes, so there was a couple of things I just wanted to ask questions about, that caught my eye. You kind of hit on some of it going through, but with the budget last year, you said you spent 16% of the budget. Typically, we really like it when departments and programs can save funds and not spend everything. I think this is one of them we don't want to save as much. Can you just explain a little bit why the 40% is being moved into this year?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons.
You did it a little bit already, but.
Yeah, some of the things that kind of listed here of what didn't get accomplished that money was identified for, obviously corridor studies is a big part of that, right? We originally submitted on a federal grant last year, were unsuccessful, that was the A-type or A-tip, whatever you wanna call it. So that money got carried over as we continued to pursue that. Obviously the construction of the protected bike lanes, we had money identified for hiring someone to actually install those. We weren't able to find a vendor that would do that until this year, so that money needed to be carried over. When we came to you a year ago, almost a year ago exactly, February 6th, we came and presented and kind of identified the list. You guys had the November before kind of said to us, we want to do this Safer Streets initiative. What are you gonna do? What can you do if we give you money? And we kind of came back in February and sat down with you and said, here's a list of all the things that we think could be applicable here. And really the direction at the time was, do it all, right? Here, we're gonna give you as much money as possible. Part of it was, we said at the time, we did not have the staff to accomplish that. We were fortunate enough to hire Emily and Kyle mid-year, but we were already halfway through the year at the time. So we were playing catch up from the beginning. I don't wanna make excuses.
I'm not
We certainly
saying that.
tried to spend as much as we can, and the intent we will spend it this year. But it's just, the condition of what we were in last year, we just could only accomplish so much.
I also think there was a strategic idea that we wanted to set aside some funding, like for the implementation of the school zones and the traffic calming, knowing that we weren't gonna be able to get those final reports and implement all within 2024, but hey, let's set aside money, not knowing what our budget for this year was going to be, to make sure that we could do those improvements and recommendations from those evaluations as well, so.
And speaking of expenditures, one of the things I saw in the memo was the purchase of the 2 EV Blazers. In my mind, that doesn't necessarily fit in with Safer Streets, that those funds could have been used for a quick project or something like that. Isn't that what the fleet was for? So just,
Did you?
I saw your message,
Why This team, I'd like to just take this one, as we have scaled this team, we've also have to scale the systems around us. And they had been, I think they've gone for as long as they could without having dedicated, vehicles
for the team
work.
or for individuals?
For-
Does everyone?
No, we have a
So
pool,
now
they
they
have
have-
6 people and 2 vehicles.
Okay.
So that's important, and that's a, example of how we have to scale.
So you had no
Systems.
vehicles before?
Right.
Not dedicated to the group,
Drive that big old white van, right?
Well, Public Works had you have access for other non-Safer Streets work though, so.
Yeah, and so like when we collect that data, we have little radar counters that I go and put up. And so sometimes if a car's not available, like it might be delayed. And so having those dedicated vehicles helps us kind of, do this data collection and this stuff that's kind of, hey, we need this like today, so.
But I'd also put in for if you wanna give us some money for some e-bikes, so that I can get them to come out into the field with me on my
There
e-bike.
you go, I like that. An e-bike is cheaper than a Blazer.
That's true.
You guys can each have an e-bike for that.
Sold. Did someone write that down? You said we can all buy.
That'll also go in the Littleton report.
Where's my e-bike?
And the last question I have is for David, actually. So the last question I have is for you. So, I've seen all your Nextdoor posts, your social media posts. I'm amazed you do get out there. There's quite a bit out there. Our town hall that Andrea and I had on Saturday, it was amazing of the about 100 people that were there. How few said they use social media or see anything on Nextdoor, despite I know that they post on Nextdoor. What other things are you doing besides some of the social media to get word out to people? Because I think one of the things we heard was like, council and staff are saying we're putting the word up, but we're not hearing any of this information.
So this is an exciting year, I think, for communications. We are, like you probably saw today that we're announcing we've got a new director who's gonna be coming on board with us soon. We're looking at a lot broader communications than we have in the past. And the funny thing about that is that we're actually going back to some older methods. We're actually looking back at more targeted mailers. We're actually looking at, that's something that we've been hearing more lately is, look, put a postcard in my hand, put a postcard in my mailbox. So that's something that we are working on building up, and actually Safer Streets is kind of one of the test projects for that.
One of the kind of fun things that I've certainly read, and I think that the team's seen too, the success of yard signs is really something, to see how many people, you had a number, just, you wouldn't think that so many folks would use a QR code if they're driving by or walking by, but I think that's another kind of older school way to
Obviously, place the yard sign on the
get
right
the
of way.
word out.
Yeah, it's so interesting because in communications world, about 10, 15 years ago, the idea was, wow, social media is gonna be the panacea that reaches everybody for free. As time has gone by, we've discovered, no, you can't lean entirely on that. Of course, we've got our, we know from the resident services that Shane mentioned that both the Littleton Report online and print editions remain very significant sources of information for the general public about city affairs. But yeah, moving into more targeted communications about specific programs, both through mailers, targeted mailing lists or email lists, and we're exploring other avenues, targeted text message notifications that folks can opt into. So this is an exciting year for communications in that regard. I'm excited to be working on a lot of those kind of projects as we expand our scope and reach.
So I ask people to not hit delete and select as junk when you get a text message.
There's a lot of sort of, fine line there with that sort of thing.
The PSA video that we mentioned with like culture change side of things, if you stream anything on Hulu or you like listen to Spotify, we're also looking into what are the other types of like advertising streaming routes that we can do rather than just publishing something on our, on our TV network. Can we get it onto other ways where people are, watching TV or listening to something and then they would hear this like PSA for Safer Streets Littleton?
One of the things I saw had the events slide that was up there. You don't need to go to it, but it had all the. It seemed like places where you want people to come to you. Have you thought about trying to go to like Breckenridge Brewery, or even go to the grocery stores, or go to where people are that happen to see it? Just set up like some more guerrilla marketing. Set up posters and talk about people that are along. It's
I was gonna say, a lot of those are the asking people to come to us, but we are also looking at, like I said, Little Jam, like providing bike valet there. We're just looking at other ways we can support that are existing events within the city of Littleton, and we can be there in
So I'm just thinking some other non-city events, like just show up and
Use the TMB, just tell them to do it and act like they're paid employees when you say that.
They've already volunteered.
They would love to get more involved. That is something we are actively working on.
I think it's our goal too, to see them.
Let's go. Alright, so yeah, that's all I have. So thank you so much.
Thank
That
you
was
all.
great. I know there's a lot there and keep working hard.
Thank you, great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Not quite done. City manager, you guys can quietly exit if you want, or you can sit here upstairs.
So I think you may have seen email, I've heard interest from now 4 council members who would like to explore looking at our fuel station zoning and land use regulations. And so I'm just wanting to check, just per your protocols, if there's interest. I think there is by what I've heard now, but I just wanna kind of surface this as we do. If there is direction, staff will prepare a study session. At this point, we're looking at April 8th as a night when we could have a study session to just kind of learn a little bit more about what a first step could be, which would likely be a moratorium, which is a legal mechanism where we can learn and do some research on policy options. So we'd probably bring you that option on April 8th and talk more about kind of the basics of land use as it relates to fuel stations. So, we have support for that?
No.
Okay.
I would look forward to my colleagues telling me why this matters.
Do you have any?
We've had one gas station built in the last 10 years.
We have too many.
So I think we have
No, you have majority, but I don't,
That's enough to.
I look forward to my colleagues explaining to me why this has risen to the top.
We can talk about that study session.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'm just letting you know where I'm at. I'm not, that wasn't I just look forward to learning about it. Please tell me.
Do we have 4?
Yep.
You have 4. I think you have 4.
Okay. I'm seeing 4.
Did you, yeah,
Yes.
there's a thumbs up.
There's 4 thumbs up.
1, 2, 3, 4. It's the same 4 that you said in your email.
Right. I had 3, I have 4.
Oh, okay.
Big gas station guy here. I love gas stations.
You don't need one across from the other one.
Anything else from you?
I'm being sarcastic.
Anything from the
It's
city
like
attorney?
anything else. I don't know.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Who?
We're gonna be working on bringing forward to council potentially some legislative issues that are going around to see if council is interested in taking positions on certain things. We have been reached out by at least a state representative who some of you may know, who's asked for an opinion on certain bills, which is nice to be considered and have our thoughts considered. And so we'll probably talk about this at our mayor's meeting on Monday.
Okay.
And get some direction to bring forward to council, so.
Like how
Some
many
ideas.
bills?
There's probably about 4 or 5 that are out there that are causing the most issue. I wouldn't say that there's anything that would be a huge impact on the city of Littleton. It's really, a lot of it is more on principle than anything, so. But stay tuned. That's it.
Okay, and then I just wanted to, Andrea and I had our town hall on Saturday. It went well. We probably had about 100 people, 75 to 100 people there. It was quite full. The one thing we did here and is, they wanna know like if Jim was there, and he offered to come and we said we didn't need him. And I know he's come to other things, but I think having Jim do a separate one, different from council would be good. So I don't know if council, I mentioned it to him yesterday morning, so I don't know.
I've been
Council-
forbidden.
Well, you could do one too, I don't know. So just
I don't get invited.
something to have, plan to do a town hall to see, because I know that one of the things they're saying, we try to get feedback, we don't get the online, so I thought, they really like the in-person thing.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I ways to do that.
Cause then you can get down to the technical detail. I mean, we kind of, in our citizen meetings, we kind of stay high up and we give our opinions and what we as representatives of citizens are gonna push for. You can tell them where the projects are at or what's coming up in more detail than we know off the top of our.
Very satisfying. They hate all your answers.
That's why we do that, so we're comfortable with that. And there are ways that I think we can do it in a similar kind of town hall format that really allows folks to get into some depth on things. So we're gonna put our heads together and think about how and when to do that. So,
Yeah, we heard from the housing one, they just said the communication they want, I thought that'd be a good way to have visible communication.
Taking time out of our strategic planning session, even if it's 20 minutes to throw some ideas out there, I'd be really in favor of it, so thanks for considering it.
And then one last thing is it's a question for staff and then kind of a note for council. It seems that we have 2 quasi judicial rezoning applications in, I saw in the DEL this morning, and we haven't got a notice, so I wanna know, one, to council, probably we shouldn't be talking about those, but I wanna check with them, I saw one that it said application submitted on 2 of them on Littleton Boulevard, so just wanna make sure we get those notices, and so there's one, so. One's the South Metro housing purchase, and then there's another one on the corner of, no, it's Spotswood or Prescott, I can't remember. It's a conversion of a commercial into the only ones I saw that said rezoning the application submitted,
We'll
so
check and we'll
just
follow
wanted to make sure,
Cause
so.
you usually let us know when there's something quasi judicial, so we.
Yeah, coming before you, so normally this will go to planning commission for their recommendation, and then it will ultimately.
But we usually get a notice to say, don't discuss it, so we need to get.
Somebody asked me a question today, I go, I think it's
Yeah.
quasi judicial.
Just wanted to,
Thank you.
check and get on it. Thanks.
thanks. Alright, that's it, we're adjourned.
Thanks.